At 2:13 a.m., 24-year-old Sophia Winters stared at another fistful of her own hair circling the drain of a private hospital sink. Outside her door at Summit Ridge Medical Center in Philadelphia, her father, Vice Admiral Marcus Winters, stood frozen in the hallway, a man who'd commanded aircraft carriers and negotiated with foreign powers, now utterly powerless as his only daughter vanished one strand at a time. 13 months. Over 300 specialists, zero answers. But the nurse they'd all ignored, the one the arrogant department heads treated like living furniture, had just seen something that would bring the entire hospital to its knees. Before we go further, I need you to stay with me until the very end of this story. Like this video, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey has traveled, and subscribe because what happens next will shake you to your core. The fluorescent lights in Summit Ridge's intensive care wing hummed at a frequency that made Sophia want to claw her own skin off. She'd mentioned it to Dr. Raymond Ashford 3 weeks ago. He'd smiled that practiced smile, the one that never reached his eyes, and told her it was probably just anxiety. Then he'd increased her antidepressants without waiting for her answer. Sophia didn't bother mentioning it again. She sat on the edge of the hospital bed now, her fingers tracing the latest bald patch above her left ear. The hair had come out in the shower this morning, not gradually, not a few strands caught in a brush, but in one smooth, horrifying clump that had stuck to her palm like seaweed. She'd stood there under the running water watching it spiral down the drain and felt nothing. That was the worst part. 13 months ago, losing hair like this would have sent her into a panic. Now, it was just Tuesday. Outside her window, Philadelphia's skyline glittered against the October darkness. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives. They were worried about traffic and deadlines and whether their coffee order would be wrong. Sophia couldn't remember what normal felt like anymore. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Winters? Mind if I come in?" Sophia recognized the voice before she saw the face. Nurse Clare Donovan, early 30s, always moving with that quiet efficiency that made you forget she was there until you needed her. Unlike most of the staff at Summit Ridge, Clare never burst into rooms like she was storming a beach. She asked. She waited. "Sure," Sophia said, not looking up from the bald spot. Clare entered with a tablet in one hand and what looked like a fresh pitcher of water in the other. She set both down on the bedside table, then did something unexpected. She sat down in the visitor's chair and actually looked at Sophia. Not at the charts, not at the monitors, at her. "How are you doing tonight?" Clare asked. Sophia almost laughed. "You want the truth or the answer that gets you out of here faster?" "I've got time." That stopped Sophia cold. When was the last time someone at Summit Ridge had said that to her? Dr. Ashford moved through his rounds like he was being chased. Dr. Patricia Vance, the neurologist who'd ordered 17 different scans, had a habit of checking her watch mid-sentence. Even the residents avoided eye contact now, like Sophia's condition might be contagious. But Clare just sat there, hands folded in her lap, waiting. "I'm losing my mind," Sophia admitted quietly. Not figuratively. "I think I'm actually going insane. The lights hurt, sounds hurt. Last week I had to leave my dad's birthday dinner because someone's perfume made me feel like my skull was splitting open. And my hair..." She gestured vaguely at her head. "You can see what's happening there." Clare nodded slowly. "When did the sensitivity to light start? Maybe 6 months ago? It's hard to remember. Everything kind of bleeds together now." "And the headaches?" Sophia frowned. "What headaches?" Clare tilted her head slightly. "You mentioned your skull splitting open. That's not... I don't get headaches. Not really. It's more like, pressure. Like something's pushing from the inside." Sophia paused, realizing how insane she sounded. "The doctors say it's stress, psychosomatic. Dr. Ashford thinks I need cognitive behavioral therapy." "What do you think?" The question caught Sophia off guard. No one had asked her what she thought in months. They'd asked how she felt, whether the medications were helping, if she'd noticed any changes. But what did she think? That required the doctors to consider she might know her own body. "I think something's wrong," Sophia said slowly. "I think it's been wrong for a long time, and everyone's so busy looking at screens and numbers that they forgot there's an actual person attached to all this failing equipment." Claire's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or agreement. "Can I check something?" Clare asked. Sophia shrugged. "You're the first person who's asked permission all week. Go ahead." Claire stood and moved behind the bed. I'm going to touch the back of your head. Tell me if anything hurts. Sophia felt gentle fingers probe the base of her skull, moving in small circles. It should have felt clinical, detached, but Claire's touch was different from the way the residents manhandled her during exams. There was intention behind it. Focus. Here, Claire said softly, her fingertips settling on a spot just below Sophia's occipital bone. Does this hurt? The moment Claire applied the slightest pressure, white light exploded behind Sophia's eyes. She gasped and jerked forward, nearly falling off the bed. I'll take that as a yes, Claire said, steadying her with one hand. How long has that spot been sensitive? Sophia's heart was hammering. The pain had already faded to a dull throb, but the shock of it lingered. I don't know. Forever? I stopped noticing. May I look at it? Sophia nodded, still catching her breath. She felt Claire's fingers again, gentler this time, parting what was left of her hair. There was a long pause. Sophia, Claire said quietly, do you have a scar here? A scar? Sophia tried to twist around. I don't think so. Why? There's a thin line of raised tissue, very faint, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Claire moved back to where Sophia could see her. Have you ever had an injury to your head? Anything that might have required stitches? Sophia's mind raced backward through years of memories. Childhood bike crashes, a nasty fall on ice in college. Nothing that seemed significant enough to... Wait. I fell off a horse, Sophia said slowly. When I was 17. We were at my uncle's ranch in Montana. The horse spooked and I went flying, hit the ground pretty hard. Did you lose consciousness? For a few seconds, maybe? My uncle said I was out before I woke up. They took me to a local clinic. The doctor said I was fine, mild concussion at worst, told me to rest and take Tylenol. Claire's expression had gone very still. Did they do any imaging? X-rays, I think, but nothing showed up. They sent me home with an ice pack. How long after the fall did your symptoms start? Sophia opened her mouth to say they were unrelated, that the fall was 7 years ago, and her symptoms had only started 13 months ago. But then she actually thought about it, really thought about it. The light sensitivity hadn't appeared 6 months ago. It had started earlier than that, so gradually she'd barely noticed. She'd switched to wearing sunglasses more often, bought blackout curtains for her apartment, told herself she was just getting older, more sensitive. And the pressure at the base of her skull, that had been there even longer. A constant companion she'd learned to ignore, like the hum of a refrigerator you stop hearing after a while. Oh my God, Sophia whispered. Claire leaned forward slightly. I want to bring this to the attending physicians, but I need your permission first. This is your body, your case. Sophia almost laughed at that. Her case, like she owned any part of this nightmare. But Claire wasn't being sarcastic. She meant it. Do it, Sophia said. Please. The meeting happened at 7 a.m. in the conference room adjacent to the ICU. Sophia wasn't invited, but her father was. Vice Admiral Winters had made it clear 13 months ago that any major discussions about his daughter's care required his presence. Claire had expected pushback, maybe even resistance. What she got was worse. Indifference. Dr. Raymond Ashford sat at the head of the table scrolling through his phone while Claire presented her findings. Dr. Patricia Vance was reviewing someone else's charts. The 3 residents in attendance looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. So you're saying, Dr. Ashford interrupted without looking up, that a 7-year-old fall that was cleared by an emergency physician is somehow responsible for Miss Winters's current condition. I'm saying it warrants investigation, Claire said evenly. The scar tissue is real. The point of tenderness is consistent with what, Nurse Donovan? Doctor. Vance cut in, finally glancing up from her charts. We've done 17 neurological scans, 2 full-body MRIs, 3 CT scans. If there was structural damage, we would have seen it. Unless you weren't looking in the right place? The room went very quiet. Dr. Ashford finally set his phone down. Excuse me. Claire could feel Vice Admiral Winters watching her from his position near the window. The man hadn't said a word since entering the room, but his presence was a weight all its own. The previous scans focused on ruling out tumors, lesions, and inflammatory conditions, Claire continued. No one was looking for old trauma because no one asked about old trauma. Miss Winters mentioned the fall to me last night only because I asked about head injuries specifically. And you think, Dr. Vance said slowly, her tone dripping with condescension, that you've discovered something that 300 specialists missed. I think I listened when she spoke. Dr. Ashford stood up. Nurse Donovan, I appreciate your enthusiasm. But diagnostic medicine is a bit more complicated than bedside manner and intuition. We have protocols, we have evidence-based guidelines, and we don't chase zebras based on a patient's vague recollection of a childhood accident. She was 17, and it wasn't vague. There's physical evidence. A faint scar that could be from anything. Dr. Ashford moved toward the door. If you'd like to continue this conversation, I suggest you speak with your nursing supervisor about appropriate scope of practice. We're done here. Vice Admiral Winters spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Are you dismissing the nurse's concerns without investigation? Dr. Ashford turned, clearly irritated at being questioned. Admiral, with all due respect, your daughter has been seen by the finest medical minds on the East Coast. If there was a structural cause, we would have found it. What Nurse Donovan is suggesting is, frankly, outside her area of expertise. Her area of expertise, the Admiral said, still in that same quiet tone, seems to be noticing things the finest medical minds on the East Coast have missed. Dr. Vance stood as well, her expression tight. Admiral Winters, I understand your frustration, but encouraging unfounded speculation isn't helpful. Your daughter needs psychiatric support, not more invasive testing based on a nurse's hunch. Claire watched the Admiral's jaw tighten. For a moment, she thought he might actually lose his composure, but he just nodded once, a sharp military movement that could have meant anything. Thank you for your time, he said. Dr. Ashford smiled that practiced smile. Of course, we'll continue monitoring Sophia's progress. If anything changes, we'll adjust her treatment plan accordingly. The meeting dissolved, residents scattered. Dr. Vance returned to her charts. Dr. Ashford checked his phone again. Claire stood there in the empty conference room, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settle on her shoulders. She'd challenged the hospital's top physicians in front of a vice admiral. She'd suggested they were wrong. She'd violated every unspoken rule about hierarchy and knowing your place, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat. Sophia was awake when Claire returned to her room. She took one look at the nurse's face and knew. They shut you down. Claire managed a small smile. Something like that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you. You didn't let me do anything. I chose this. Claire moved to check the monitors, more out of habit than necessity. Your vitals look good. My vitals have looked good for 13 months. That's kind of the problem. Claire didn't respond to that. She was thinking. Sophia could see it in the way her eyes had gone distant, focused on something internal. What are you considering? Sophia asked. Claire hesitated. There's someone I know. Dr. Nina Reeves. She's in neurosurgery at Hopkins. We trained together before I came to Summit Ridge. Why do I feel like there's a but coming? But going around Dr. Ashford's head could get me fired, and it might not even help. Dr. Reeves is brilliant, but she's also buried in her own cases. I'd be asking her to review a patient she's never met, based on findings that the current care team has already rejected. Sophia felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't quite hope. She'd learned to be suspicious of hope months ago, but it was close. Would she listen? Sophia asked. To me? Maybe. We've kept in touch over the years. She respected my clinical judgment back when we worked together. Claire paused. But this isn't just about me. If Dr. Reeves agrees to consult and find something, it makes Dr. Ashford and Dr. Vance look incompetent. They won't forget that, and they definitely won't forget who brought her in. So you're risking your career for someone you barely know. I'm doing my job. They're the ones who forgot how. Sophia studied Claire's face for a long moment. The nurse looked tired, actually tired. Not the performative exhaustion some of the staff wore like badges of honor. There were shadows under her eyes. Her scrubs were wrinkled in a way that suggested she'd been wearing them for more than one shift. When did you last sleep? Sophia asked. Claire blinked at the change in subject. I'm fine. That's not an answer. About 30 hours ago, maybe 36. It's been busy. Sophia shook her head slowly. You've been here for a day and a half, awake, working, and you're about to tank your own career for me. Why? Claire was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Sophia had ever heard it. 3 years ago, my sister died in a hospital in Boston. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. She'd been complaining about abdominal pain for months, but her primary care doctor kept telling her it was IBS. By the time someone actually listened and ordered the right tests, it was too late. She was 28. Sophia's throat tightened. "Claire, I'm so sorry." The nurses knew. They kept pushing for more tests. They documented everything. But the doctors ignored them because nurses don't diagnose. We observe, we report, we follow orders. And my sister died because the people with the power to save her were too arrogant to listen to the people who actually spent time with her. Claire met Sophia's eyes. "I can't save my sister, but I can do this. So yes, I'm going to call Dr. Reeves, and if Dr. Ashford wants to fire me for it, that's his choice. But I'm done watching people suffer because someone decided their medical degree makes them infallible." Sophia didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. Claire pulled out her phone. "I'll step into the hall to make the call. Try to rest." "Claire?" The nurse paused at the door. "Thank you," Sophia said quietly, "for seeing me. Not just the numbers on the screen, me." Claire's expression softened. "You're not invisible, Sophia. You never were. Some people just weren't looking." Dr. Nina Reeves arrived at Summit Ridge at 4 p.m., exactly 9 hours after Claire's call. She came through the staff entrance, bypassing the main lobby and the administrative gatekeepers who might have raised questions about an outside consultant showing up unannounced. Claire met her in the parking garage. "You look terrible," Nina said by way of greeting. "Nice to see you too." Nina grinned, but it faded quickly as they moved toward the elevator. "Tell me everything. And I mean everything. Don't leave out details because you think they're irrelevant." Claire laid it out as they rode up to the ICU. The hair loss, the light sensitivity, the pressure at the base of the skull, the scar tissue, the 7-year-old fall that no one had thought to connect. "And the current team's assessment?" Nina asked. "Psychosomatic. Possible conversion disorder. Dr. Ashford wants to increase her psychiatric medications." Nina's jaw tightened. "Raymond Ashford is overseeing this case? You know him?" "Unfortunately. We overlapped during my residency at Mass General. The man's brilliant when he bothers to pay attention, but he's got the ego of a Byzantine emperor. If he's already decided Sophia's condition is psychological, he'll die on that hill before admitting he might be wrong." They reached the ICU. Claire badged them through. "I need to warn you," Claire said quietly. "If we find something, this gets ugly. Dr. Ashford won't take it well." Nina stopped walking. "Claire, you called me because you think this woman is suffering from undiagnosed structural damage that's been missed for over a year. If that's true, and if I can help, I don't give a damn about Raymond Ashford's ego. Do you?" "Not even a little bit." "Good. Let's go meet your patient." But Sophia was prepared for another dismissive specialist who'd spend 5 minutes in her room before declaring her unsalvageable and moving on. What she got was Dr. Nina Reeves, a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and an intensity that reminded Sophia of her father in planning mode. "Miss Winters, I'm Dr. Reeves, neurosurgery at Hopkins. Nurse Donovan reached out to me about your case. I'm here in an unofficial consulting capacity, which means this conversation is off the record unless you want it on the record. Your call." Sophia glanced at Claire, who gave the tiniest nod. "Off the record works for me," Sophia said. Nina pulled up a chair and sat down at eye level, the second person in 13 months to do that. "I've reviewed your chart remotely, all 17 neurological scans, all the blood work, the psychiatric evaluations. I have questions, but first I want to hear from you directly. What does this feel like? Not what the doctors have told you it feels like. What you actually experience." Sophia took a breath. "It feels like I'm disappearing. Not dying, disappearing. Like someone's erasing me one piece at a time, and everyone's so focused on the pieces that they forgot there was ever a whole person. The lights hurt, sounds hurt. I can't sleep without medication, and even then I dream about drowning. My hair falls out in clumps, and there's this constant pressure at the base of my skull that I've gotten so used to, I only notice it when someone touches the spot, which no one does because no one looks." Nina was quiet for a moment. Then she stood. "May I examine you?" "Please." The exam was different from anything Sophia had experienced at Summit Ridge. Nina didn't rush. She tested reflexes, checked pupil response, asked Sophia to track her finger through various movements. Then she moved to the back of the bed. "I'm going to palpate your occipital region," Nina said. "Claire mentioned a point of tenderness. I want to confirm." Sophia braced herself. Nina's fingers found the spot almost immediately. The white light came again, but this time Sophia was ready for it. She hissed through her teeth, but didn't jerk away. Interesting, Nina murmured. Clare, hand me the pen light. Sophia felt the gentle pressure of fingers parting her hair, then the cool touch of metal against her scalp. There, Nina said quietly. Do you see it? The scar tissue? Clare asked. And the slight depression beneath it. That's not normal healing. That's a fracture line that was never properly set. Sophia's heart started pounding. What does that mean? Nina came back around to face her. It means I want to run a very specific type of scan. High-resolution CT focused on the occipital bone and the nerve clusters at the base of your skull. The standard scans you've had were designed to catch big problems. Tumors, bleeds, major lesions. What I'm looking for is subtle. A hairline fracture that healed incorrectly and is now putting pressure on the nerve bundle responsible for, among other things, hair follicle stimulation and pain processing. Can you do that here? Sophia asked. Nina hesitated. Technically, yes. Summit Ridge has the equipment, but ordering a scan without the attending physician's approval is... I'll approve it. All three women turned. Vice Admiral Marcus Winters stood in the doorway. Sophia hadn't even heard him enter. Dad. Dr. Reeves, the Admiral said, moving into the room. I'm Marcus Winters, Sophia's father. I've been listening from the hallway for the last 5 minutes, and I apologize for the intrusion, but if you believe this scan could provide answers, I want it done. Immediately. Nina straightened slightly. Admiral, I appreciate that, but I'm not on staff here. I can't order tests for another hospital's patient without going through proper channels. What if the patient requests it? Can she authorize testing? Nina glanced at Sophia. In theory, yes, but Dr. Ashford would have to sign off on any scan orders. And given our earlier meeting, I doubt Dr. Ashford isn't the only physician in this hospital. The Admiral pulled out his phone. Give me 5 minutes. He stepped back into the hallway. Sophia could hear his voice, clipped and authoritative, speaking to someone on the other end. Clare and Nina exchanged glances. Your father doesn't mess around, Nina observed. He's been helpless for over a year, Sophia said quietly. Watching me fade, unable to fix it. This is the first time someone's given him a target he can actually engage. 2 minutes later, the Admiral returned. Dr. Helena Cross from Radiology will meet you in imaging in 20 minutes, he said. She's cleared the schedule. Dr. Ashford has been informed as a courtesy, but this is happening regardless of his opinion. Nina blinked. How did you... Dr. Cross's son is a naval aviator stationed in Bahrain. I wrote his letter of recommendation for flight school 6 years ago. She owes me nothing, but she remembers. The Admiral's expression was granite. Get my daughter answers, Dr. Reeves. Please. Nina nodded once. We'll need to move her now. Clare, can you prep her for transport? Already on it, Clare said, releasing the bed's brake locks. The imaging suite was cold and bright and smelled like disinfectant. Sophia lay perfectly still while the machine hummed and clicked around her, taking slices of her skull in microscopic detail. Dr. Helena Cross monitored from behind the glass, her expression unreadable. Clare stood next to the Admiral in the observation room. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say yet. Nina emerged from the control room 30 minutes later, her face carefully neutral. We've got the images. Dr. Cross is processing them now. It'll take about 20 minutes to get full resolution. And then? The Admiral asked. And then we'll know. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Sophia was moved to a recovery room adjacent to imaging. Clare brought her water. The Admiral paced. Nina disappeared to review the scans as they rendered. When Nina returned, she wasn't alone. Dr. Cross was with her, and both women wore expressions that made Sophia's stomach drop. Talk to me, the Admiral said. Nina set a tablet on the table and pulled up the first image. This is your daughter's occipital bone. Do you see this line here? She traced a faint shadow with her finger. That's a healed fracture. It's thin, almost invisible on standard imaging, but it's there. Dr. Cross pulled up another image. And this is the tissue surrounding the fracture site. See how it's thickened? That's scar tissue formation. It's been building for years, and it's compressing this nerve bundle right here. Sophia stared at the screen. That's what's been causing everything? Not just causing, Nina said carefully. Explaining. The pressure on the nerve bundle would account for the chronic pain you've adapted to. The disruption to the blood flow in that region would explain the hair loss. Those nerves feed the follicles. And the sensitivity to light and sound, That's consistent with occipital nerve compression. The Admiral's voice was very quiet. How long has this been happening? Based on the degree of scar tissue buildup, I'd estimate it started shortly after the initial injury and has been progressing slowly ever since. The symptoms probably appeared gradually enough that Sophia adapted without realizing how abnormal they were. Sophia felt dizzy. 7 years. I've been living with this for 7 years. And 13 months ago, Clare added softly, something changed. The compression reached a critical threshold. That's when the acute symptoms started. Nina nodded. The body compensates until it can't anymore. Then everything cascades. Can you fix it? The Admiral asked. Nina met his eyes. Yes, but it requires surgery. We'd need to decompress the nerve bundle, remove the scar tissue, and possibly repair the bone structure to prevent recurrence. It's delicate work. There are risks. What kind of risks? Infection, bleeding, potential nerve damage if the scar tissue has fused in ways we can't see on imaging. In rare cases, paralysis. But if we don't do this, Sophia's symptoms will continue to worsen. Eventually, the nerve damage could become permanent. Sophia looked at her father. The man who'd faced down enemy combatants and navigated political minefields looked absolutely terrified. Baby girl, he said quietly. This is your choice. Not mine. Not the doctor's. Yours. Sophia didn't hesitate. Do it. I want my life back. Nina nodded. I'll need to coordinate with Summit Ridge's surgical team. This is still their hospital, but I'm going to request primary surgeon status, and I'm going to insist Clare be present in the OR as your patient advocate. Will Dr. Ashford allow that? Clare asked. Dr. Ashford, Nina said flatly, is about to have a very bad week, because the moment we file this surgical request, the hospital's administration is going to want to know how over 300 specialists missed a fractured skull for 13 months. And I intend to make sure they get a very detailed answer. The knock on Dr. Ashford's office door came at 8 p.m. He'd been reviewing Sophia Winter's file for the third time since learning about the unauthorized scan, trying to find an angle that didn't make him look negligent. So far, he'd failed. Come in. Dr. Nina Reeves entered without waiting for further invitation. She set a tablet on his desk. These are the imaging results from this afternoon. I've already filed my surgical recommendation with the hospital's chief of surgery. Dr. Cross has co-signed. The procedure is scheduled for 6 a.m. tomorrow. Ashford didn't touch the tablet. You went over my head. I went through proper channels. You're the attending physician. You've been notified. But Miss Winters requested the surgery. Her father approved. And the imaging clearly shows a surgical issue that's been missed for over a year. By you, Ashford said coldly. This reflects poorly on everyone involved in her care, including you. I wasn't involved in her care until 9 hours ago. You've had 13 months. Ashford stood. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Coming into my hospital, making me look incompetent in front of a patient's family. This isn't about you, Raymond. It never was. But you made it about you the moment you dismissed Nurse Donovan's concerns without investigation. Now a young woman has proof that her suffering was real, diagnosable, and treatable. And a lot of people are going to want to know why the diagnosis took a nurse and an outside consultant 9 hours to find when it should have been caught in the first week. Ashford's face had gone very red. Get out of my office. Gladly. I'll see you in the surgical suite tomorrow. 6 a.m. Don't be late. Nina left. Ashford stared at the closed door for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and called the hospital's legal department. Titim. At midnight, Sophia was prepped for surgery. The procedure was scheduled for dawn, but the pre-op process had begun hours earlier. Clare had stayed past the end of her shift, ignoring the pointed looks from her supervisor. You should go home, Sophia said. Get some sleep. I'll sleep when you're in recovery. Clare checked the IV line for the third time. How are you feeling? Terrified. Relieved. Angry. Take your pick. All normal? Sophia managed a weak smile. You're going to get in so much trouble for this. Worth it. The door opened. Vice Admiral Winters entered, still in uniform despite the late hour. He'd been making calls all evening to people Sophia didn't know, having conversations she wasn't privy to. Now he looked exhausted and fierce all at once. I need to tell you something, he said to Sophia, and I need you to hear me. Sophia sat up a bit straighter. Okay. I failed you. For 13 months, I watched you suffer, and I let these people convince me it was all in your head. I brought in specialist after specialist, but I never questioned their authority. I never demanded they actually listen to you. I was so focused on finding someone with the right credentials that I missed the one person who actually gave a damn." He looked at Claire. "Nurse Donovan saved your life. Not because she's smarter than the doctors, but because she remembered you're a human being, not a diagnostic puzzle. She risked her career because it was the right thing to do. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets that choice." Claire's eyes had gone suspiciously bright. "Admiral, that's not necessary." "It's a promise, not a negotiation." He turned back to Sophia. "When you wake up from surgery, things are going to be different, not just medically. The hospital administration has already started asking questions. Dr. Ashford's department is under review, and I've made some calls to people who can ensure this doesn't just disappear into a confidential settlement." Sophia's breath caught. "Dad, what did you do?" "What I should have done 13 months ago. I made noise. Loud, official, impossible to ignore noise." His expression was granite. "No one gets to dismiss my daughter and walk away clean. Not anymore." At 5:47 a.m., Sophia was wheeled into the surgical suite. Dr. Nina Reeves was already scrubbed in, reviewing the imaging one final time. Claire stood in the observation gallery, having been granted temporary access by the chief of surgery himself, a man who'd apparently received a very compelling phone call from someone in Naval Command overnight. Dr. Ashford arrived at 5:53, 3 minutes before the scheduled start time. He looked like he hadn't slept. Nina didn't acknowledge him. She just nodded to the anesthesiologist. "Let's begin." The surgery took 4 hours and 17 minutes. Claire watched every second of it, her hands gripping the gallery railing. She saw Nina's steady hands navigate scar tissue that had fused to nerve bundles in ways the imaging hadn't fully captured. She saw the fractured bone fragment, so small it looked insignificant, but positioned in exactly the wrong place to cause maximum damage. She saw the moment Nina freed the compressed nerve cluster and blood flow returned to tissue that had been slowly dying for 7 years. When it was over, Nina stepped back from the table and let out a long, controlled breath. "Nerve function restored," she said. "No complications. Let's close." In the gallery, Claire felt her knees go weak. She'd been right. The theory she'd built from one conversation and a faint scar had been right. Sophia's suffering had been real, diagnosable, fixable. And every single specialist who'd dismissed her had been catastrophically wrong. But Sophia woke in recovery at noon. The first thing she noticed was the absence of pressure at the base of her skull. The constant companion she'd lived with for so long was simply gone. The second thing she noticed was her father, asleep in the chair next to her bed, still in uniform, his hand resting on top of hers. The third thing she noticed was Claire standing by the window, watching the city. "Hey," Sophia whispered. Claire turned immediately. "Hey yourself, how do you feel?" "Different. It's quiet in my head. Is that normal?" "After 7 years of nerve compression? I'd say it's a miracle." Claire moved closer. "Dr. Reeves said the surgery went perfectly, no complications. She'll want to monitor you for a few days, but the prognosis is excellent." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. You were right, and they were all wrong, and you risked everything to prove it." "I didn't prove anything. Your body did. I just paid attention." The Admiral stirred. He opened his eyes, saw Sophia awake, and sat up so fast he nearly knocked over the water pitcher. "Baby girl." "I'm okay, Dad. I'm actually okay." He looked like he wanted to believe it, but didn't quite dare. "The pain?" "Gone." Something in the Admiral's expression crumbled. He pressed his forehead against their joined hands and just breathed. Claire stepped quietly toward the door. "Wait," Sophia called. "Don't go, please. I need to say something." Claire paused. Sophia looked at her father, then at the nurse who'd refused to let her disappear. "Whatever happens next, with the hospital, with the investigation, with all of it, I want it on record that Claire Donovan saved my life. Not just medically. She saw me when I was invisible. She fought for me when everyone else had given up. And if there's any justice in this world, she won't face consequences for being the only person brave enough to do her job right." The Admiral raised his head. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. "Consider it recorded. And Nurse Donovan?" Claire met his gaze. "You have my word. Whatever comes next, you're protected. I'll make sure of it." Claire nodded once, unable to trust her voice. Outside the recovery room, the hospital was beginning to realize what had happened. Word was spreading through the ICU. An outside consultant had performed emergency surgery on a patient the attending physicians had deemed untreatable. The diagnosis had been a structural injury missed for over a year, and the whole case had been cracked by a nurse. By the time the sun set on Philadelphia that evening, Summit Ridge Medical Center's administration had convened an emergency board meeting. And in her hospital bed, Sophia Winters touched the base of her skull and felt nothing but healthy, healing skin. For the first time in 7 years, she was free. The emergency board meeting convened at 9 p.m. in Summit Ridge's executive conference room on the 14th floor, far from the patient wards where the real work happened. 12 administrators sat around polished mahogany, every one of them holding tablets displaying the same surgical report. The air conditioning hummed. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Philadelphia's lights glittered like scattered diamonds. Dr. Raymond Ashford sat at one end of the table, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Across from him, Dr. Patricia Vance kept her expression carefully neutral, but her hands were clasped so hard her knuckles had gone white. Neither of them had been officially accused of anything yet, but they both knew what was coming. Eleanor Hutchins, Summit Ridge's chief executive officer, entered last. She was a small woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd built her career on crisis management and damage control. This, however, was different. This had teeth. She sat down without preamble. Dr. Ashford, Dr. Vance, would either of you like to explain to me how a patient under your direct care suffered from a misdiagnosed skull fracture for 13 months while over 300 specialists cycled through her case? Ashford spoke first. With respect, Ms. Hutchins, Miss Winters presented with symptoms consistent with multiple differential diagnoses. We followed standard diagnostic protocols. Every test was justified. Every test except the one that would have caught the actual problem, Eleanor interrupted. I've reviewed the imaging orders. 17 neurological scans. Not one specifically targeted the occipital bone structure. Why? Because there was no indication of trauma, Dr. Vance said. The patient didn't mention the horseback fall until last night. The patient mentioned it to Nurse Donovan within 20 minutes of being asked. How many times did you ask, Dr. Vance? Silence. Eleanor set her tablet down with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a gunshot. Let me tell you what I see here. I see a young woman who spent over a year losing her hair, her health, and her sanity while the doctors responsible for her care convinced themselves she was mentally ill. I see those same doctors dismissing a nurse's concerns without investigation because she didn't have the right initials after her name. And I see an outside consultant diagnosing the problem in under 9 hours because she actually listened when the patient spoke. Ms. Hutchins, Ashford said carefully, I understand the optics are challenging. The optics are catastrophic, Dr. Ashford. Vice Admiral Marcus Winters has already filed formal complaints with the State Medical Board, the Joint Commission, and the Navy's Medical Corps Oversight Division. By morning, this will be national news. Summit Ridge's reputation is about to take a direct hit, and I need to know if we're defending you or distancing ourselves. Ashford's face had gone pale. You're threatening my position. I'm telling you the reality of the situation. You had 13 months to find a fractured skull. A nurse found it in one conversation. That's not a diagnostic challenge. That's negligence. Dr. Vance leaned forward. We can't be expected to pursue every tangential theory brought forward by nursing staff? Eleanor's voice dropped to something dangerous. Finish that sentence very carefully, Dr. Vance. Vance closed her mouth. Eleanor stood. Effective immediately, both of you are on administrative leave pending a full departmental review. Dr. Nina Reeves will assume temporary oversight of Miss Winters' continued care. Nurse Clare Donovan will receive a formal commendation and be assigned as patient liaison for the duration of Miss Winters' recovery. And both of you will make yourselves available for interviews with the investigative committee I'm forming tonight. This is premature, Ashford said, standing as well. We haven't even... Dr. Ashford, a vice admiral's daughter nearly lost her life because you were too arrogant to consider you might be wrong. Premature would have been acting after she died. Now get out of my conference room, both of you. They left. Eleanor waited until the door closed before she allowed herself one long, controlled breath. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. Mr. Winters, this is Eleanor Hutchins at Summit Ridge. I wanted to inform you personally that we've taken the first steps in addressing the failures in your daughter's care. I know it doesn't undo the damage, but I need you to know we're treating this with the seriousness it deserves." Whatever the Admiral said on the other end made Eleanor's expression tighten. When she hung up 3 minutes later, she looked 10 years older. Downstairs in recovery, Sophia knew none of this yet. She was too busy marveling at the absence of pain. Claire had stayed through shift change, ignoring the pointed suggestions from the night supervisor that she go home. Now it was approaching midnight, and Sophia had finally convinced her father to leave for a few hours of actual sleep. The Admiral had resisted, but exhaustion and 2 days without rest had won. He'd left with a promise to return at dawn, which left Claire and Sophia alone in the quiet recovery room. "You're going to collapse," Sophia said. "How long have you been awake now?" Claire checked her watch. 49 hours, give or take. "That's insane." "I'll sleep when you're stable." "I am stable. Dr. Reeves said so herself." "Go home, Claire, please." Claire smiled faintly. "Your father made me promise not to leave you alone until he got back, and I don't break promises to vice admirals." Sophia studied the nurse's face in the dim light. There were shadows under her eyes, so dark they looked like bruises. Her scrubs were the same ones she'd been wearing yesterday. But her expression was calm, almost peaceful. "You're not scared?" Sophia asked. "Of what?" "What happens next?" "The fallout. Dr. Ashford looked like he wanted to murder someone when he left the surgical gallery this morning, and Dr. Vance won't forget that you went over her head." Claire was quiet for a moment. "I'm terrified. I've worked at Summit Ridge for 6 years. I've built relationships here. I've earned respect from most of the staff, and I just burned all of it to the ground in less than 24 hours. "Then why do you look so calm?" "Because I'd do it again, every single time, and that clarity is worth more than job security." Sophia felt her throat tighten. "You shouldn't have had to choose." "No, but I did, and I chose you, so whatever happens next, I can live with it." The door opened softly. "Doctor." Nina Reeves entered, looking significantly more awake than either of them felt. She had a tablet under one arm and 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She offered one to Claire. "You look like death," Nina said. "Thanks. You're a real charmer." Nina turned to Sophia. "How's the pain level?" 0, which is so weird I keep waiting for it to come back. "It won't. The nerve compression is resolved. You might have some residual soreness from the incision site, but the chronic pain is gone." Nina pulled up a chair. "I wanted to update you both on what's happening upstairs. The hospital administration held an emergency meeting tonight. Dr. Ashford and Dr. Vance have been placed on administrative leave." Sophia sat up straighter. "What?" "They're under investigation, formal review by an independent committee. The hospital's legal team is involved, and from what I understand, the state medical board will be opening their own inquiry." Claire set down her coffee very carefully. "How bad is this going to get?" "For them? Career ending, potentially. For you?" Nina met Claire's eyes. "You're being formally commended. Patient liaison assignment. The CEO mentioned your name specifically as an example of the kind of clinical excellence Summit Ridge should be known for." "I don't want a commendation. I want to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else." "Then you'll be pleased to know that's exactly what the review committee is tasked with preventing. New protocols, mandatory trauma history intake, expanded nurse consultation requirements." Nina smiled slightly. "You started a revolution, Claire, whether you wanted to or not." Sophia looked between them. "What about the people who tried to bury this? The residents who ignored me? The specialists who cycled through without actually looking? Do they face consequences too?" "That depends on what the investigation uncovers. But I'll be honest with you, Sophia. Medical negligence cases are complicated. Proving willful incompetence versus honest diagnostic error is nearly impossible. Most of those specialists will walk away with nothing more than a black mark on their records. That's not justice. No, it's bureaucracy. But it's also reality." Sophia leaned back against her pillows, frustration warring with exhaustion. "So Ashford and Vance take the fall. Everyone else gets a slap on the wrist, and the system keeps grinding along like nothing happened." Nina hesitated. "Not necessarily. Your father made some calls tonight, to people I don't have clearance to know about. Whatever happens next, it's bigger than just Summit Ridge's internal review." Claire frowned. "What kind of calls?" "The kind that involve federal oversight of military-adjacent medical facilities. Summit Ridge treats active duty personnel and their families. That puts it under a very specific jurisdiction when it comes to care standards." And if the Admiral can prove his daughter's treatment violated those standards, Nina trailed off meaningfully. Sophia's eyes widened. He's going scorched earth. He's ensuring accountability. There's a difference. The room fell quiet. Outside, an ambulance siren wailed past, Doppler shifting into silence. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. The hospital kept breathing, kept moving, indifferent to the earthquake happening in its administrative offices. I need to tell you something, Sophia said suddenly. Both of you. Before this gets any bigger. Claire and Nina waited. When I was 17, right after the fall, the clinic doctor who cleared me was drunk. I could smell it on him. My uncle noticed too, but we were 3 hours from the nearest real hospital, and I seemed fine, so we just left. I never told anyone because I didn't want to get the guy in trouble. He was the only doctor in that town. People depended on him. Nina's expression had gone very still. Sophia, I know it was stupid, but I was 17 and scared and I didn't want to cause problems. So I kept quiet. And now I'm wondering if that decision cost me 7 years of my life. Claire moved closer to the bed. That doctor's negligence is not your fault. You were a minor. You were in pain. You trusted the adult in the room to do his job. The fact that he failed you doesn't make you responsible for the consequences. But if I'd spoken up, you'd probably have been ignored anyway, Nina cut in. Because that's what happens when young women question medical authority. They get patted on the head and told not to worry. The system failed you twice, Sophia. Once when you were 17 and again when you were 23. Neither time was your fault. Sophia's vision blurred. She hadn't cried during the surgery prep. Hadn't cried when they wheeled her into the OR. But now, hearing someone actually say out loud that she wasn't to blame, the tears came fast and hot. Claire grabbed tissues from the bedside table. Nina just sat quietly, letting Sophia process. I'm sorry, Sophia managed after a moment. I don't know why. Because you've been holding it together for 13 months, Claire said gently. And now you finally don't have to. So cry. Scream if you want. You've earned it. Sophia did cry. Not the quiet, restrained tears she'd learned to hide from the specialists who already thought she was hysterical. Real, ugly sobbing that left her breathless and raw. Claire held her hand through it. Nina stayed in the chair, a steady presence. When the tears finally subsided, Sophia felt hollowed out but somehow lighter. Better? Nina asked. Yeah. Good. Because I need to prepare you for what's coming next. The media is going to find out about this. Probably within 48 hours. When they do, you're going to be asked for statements, interviews. Your story is going to become public property whether you want it to or not. Sophia wiped her face. Can I refuse? You can. But the narrative will be written with or without your input, and I promise you the hospital's PR team will spin this to minimize their liability. They'll make you sympathetic but vague, a victim of unfortunate circumstances rather than institutional failure. What should I do? Nina leaned forward. Tell the truth. All of it. The dismissals. The condescension. The way they treated Claire, the drunk doctor in Montana, every ugly detail. Because the only way this actually changes anything is if people understand how completely the system broke down. Claire looked uncomfortable. Nina, if Sophia goes public with everything, she's going to face backlash. People will question her, accuse her of exaggerating. The hospital will retaliate. Let them try. She's got a vice admiral in her corner and documentation that proves every word. They come after Sophia, they'll regret it. Sophia found herself smiling despite everything. You're kind of terrifying, you know that? I've been told, usually right before I win. A soft knock interrupted them. All three women turned. A young man in a suit stood in the doorway looking deeply uncomfortable. Miss Winters? I'm David Marsh from Summit Ridge's legal department. I apologize for the late hour, but I need to speak with you about the investigation. Nina stood immediately. No, absolutely not. My patient is 12 hours post-op and not in any condition to be questioned by legal. I'm not questioning her. I'm here to inform her of her rights and the hospital's position moving forward. At midnight? That's not information delivery, that's intimidation. David shifted his weight. Dr. Reeves, I promise you, I'm not here to intimidate anyone. Miss Hutchins sent me specifically to make sure Miss Winters understands she has no obligation to speak with anyone from the hospital without representation present, including me. That stopped Nina short. Hutchins sent you? She did. She wanted Miss Winters to know that Summit Ridge is committed to full transparency and accountability. Whatever happened in her care, we're not hiding from it. He looked at Sophia. You have every right to legal counsel, every right to refuse interviews, every right to pursue civil action if you choose. And the hospital will cooperate fully with any investigation, internal or external. Sophia blinked. Why are you telling me this? Because it's the right thing to do, and because Ms. Hutchins is very aware that this hospital's reputation depends on handling this correctly. David pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the bedside table. That's my direct line. If you need anything, legal advice, patient advocacy, even just someone to explain the process, call me. Anytime. He left as quietly as he'd arrived. Nina picked up the card, examining it like it might explode. That was unexpected. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Sophia asked. Honestly, I'm not sure. Either Hutchins is genuinely trying to do right by you, or she's positioning the hospital to claim they were cooperative when this inevitably goes to court. Can it be both? I suppose it can, but in my experience, hospitals don't admit fault unless they're absolutely certain they'll lose bigger if they fight. Claire had been quiet through the exchange. Now she spoke up. What if they're scared? Nina turned. Of what? Of the Admiral. Think about it. He's got access to oversight boards, federal agencies, and enough political capital to bury this hospital if he wants to. Maybe Hutchins is trying to get ahead of the storm before it destroys everything. Then she's smarter than I gave her credit for. Down the hall, a code blue was called. The overhead speakers crackled to life with room numbers and urgency. Somewhere in Summit Ridge, someone was dying or being saved. The hospital's rhythm continued, indifferent to corporate machinations. Sophia touched the bandage at the base of her skull carefully. I don't want revenge. I just want to make sure no one else disappears the way I did. Then we make that the goal, Nina said. Full systemic review, protocol changes, accountability where it's warranted, and your story as the catalyst. Our story, Sophia corrected, looking at Clare. This doesn't happen without her. Clare looked like she wanted to argue, but Nina cut her off. She's right. You're part of this now, whether you like it or not. Which means you need to be smart about how you navigate what comes next. Meaning? Meaning the nurses' union is going to want to talk to you, patient advocacy groups, possibly media. You stood up to attending physicians and saved a patient's life. That makes you a symbol. Claire's expression went carefully blank. I don't want to be a symbol. I want to be a nurse. Those aren't mutually exclusive, but you need to prepare yourself. This story is bigger than Summit Ridge. It's about power dynamics in healthcare, about who gets listened to and who gets dismissed, about what happens when institutional arrogance meets individual courage. Nina's voice softened. You did something extraordinary, Clare. Don't minimize it just because it makes you uncomfortable. Before Clare could respond, the door opened again. This time it was the night supervisor, a severe woman in her 50s named Judith Carmichael, who'd never had a kind word for anyone below attending physician rank. Nurse Donovan, Judith said crisply. You're needed in Ms. Hutchins' office, immediately. Clare stood slowly. It's nearly 1 a.m. Ms. Hutchins is aware. She wants to speak with you before the morning shift begins. Sophia felt panic rise in her chest. Wait, what's happening? Nothing for you to worry about, Miss Winters. This is an internal staffing matter. Judith's eyes flicked to Clare. Now, please. Clare looked at Nina, who nodded once. Then she looked at Sophia. I'll be back, I promise. Clare, but the nurse was already following Judith into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind them. Sophia turned to Nina. They're going to fire her. We don't know that. Yes, we do. That supervisor looked like she was escorting a prisoner. Nina's jaw tightened. If they try to scapegoat Clare for exposing their failures, I will personally ensure it backfires so spectacularly they'll regret ever learning her name. How? I know people, influential people, people who care deeply about protecting nurses from administrative retaliation. One phone call and Clare will have more legal support than she knows what to do with. Sophia wanted to believe that, but she'd spent 13 months learning that the system protected itself first and individuals never. What if that's not enough? Nina met her eyes. Then your father and I will make it enough. Upstairs in the administrative wing, Clare followed Judith through corridors she'd never walked before. This was executive territory, plush carpeting, art on the walls, the kind of hushed atmosphere that screamed money and power. She felt acutely aware of her wrinkled scrubs and unwashed hair. Judith stopped outside a door marked Chief Executive Officer and knocked once. "Come in?" Eleanor Hutchins sat behind a desk made of dark wood that probably cost more than Claire's annual salary, but her expression wasn't hostile. If anything, she looked exhausted. "Nurse Donovan, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Claire sat. Judith remained standing by the door like a sentinel. Eleanor folded her hands on the desk. "I'm going to be direct with you, because I suspect you appreciate directness. You've put this hospital in an extraordinarily difficult position." Here it comes, Claire thought. The threats, the ultimatums, the carefully worded suggestions that she resign quietly. "You exposed catastrophic failures in our diagnostic protocols," Eleanor continued. "You went around the chain of command, you brought in an outside consultant without authorization, and you were absolutely, unquestionably right to do all of it." Claire blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You saved a patient's life by refusing to accept inadequate care. That's precisely the kind of clinical judgment we claim to value at Summit Ridge. The fact that it required you to violate protocol tells me our protocols are broken." Eleanor leaned back in her chair. "I want to offer you a position." "I already have a position. Not like this. We're creating a new role. Patient Advocacy Coordinator. Your job would be to serve as a bridge between nursing staff and attending physicians. When nurses observe something the doctors are missing, you make sure it gets heard. You'd have authority to request second opinions, outside consultations, and specialized testing without going through the usual hierarchy." Claire's mind was spinning. "You're offering me a promotion. I'm offering you power. The power to do what you did for Sophia Winters for every patient who needs it. Formal authority to challenge diagnostic assumptions, protection from retaliation when you do." "Why?" 2 hours ago, Dr. Ashford and Dr. Vance were blaming me for making them look bad. Now you're giving me a position specifically designed to keep doing that?" Eleanor's smile was thin and sharp. "Because Dr. Ashford and Dr. Vance are finished. Their careers at Summit Ridge are over, and I need to rebuild this department's credibility from the ground up. That requires admitting we were wrong and demonstrating we're willing to change. You're the proof that change is possible." Claire felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. "What if I say no?" "Then you continue your current role with my personal gratitude and a formal commendation. No retaliation, no consequences. But I hope you'll consider it because I meant what I said. You have a gift for seeing what others miss. That gift shouldn't be limited by outdated hierarchies." "I need time to think about it." "Of course. Take a few days." "But Claire?" Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "What you did took extraordinary courage. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Claire stood on shaking legs. "Is that all?" "One more thing. Vice Admiral Winters has requested a meeting with you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. in the family conference room. I told him I'd pass along the message." Claire's stomach dropped. "Do you know what he wants?" "To thank you, I imagine, and possibly to discuss what happens next. The Admiral has made it very clear he intends to see this through to the end." Claire nodded and turned to leave. She made it to the hallway before her knees gave out. She caught herself against the wall, breathing hard. Judith appeared beside her. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, just tired." "You should go home. Get some rest." Claire wanted to argue, but the adrenaline that had been sustaining her for the last 50 hours was finally draining away. She felt hollowed out, running on fumes. "Yeah, okay." She made it back to Sophia's room long enough to confirm the patient was stable and sleeping peacefully under Nina's watchful eye. Then she stumbled to the parking garage, got in her car, and drove home through empty Philadelphia streets. Her apartment was dark and cold. She didn't bother turning on lights, just kicked off her shoes, fell into bed fully clothed, and let unconsciousness take her. She dreamed of operating rooms and fractured skulls and a young woman whose hair fell like snow. Morning came too fast. Claire woke at 8 with barely enough time to shower and change before the meeting with the Admiral. She drove back to Summit Ridge running on coffee and anxiety, her mind churning through every possible scenario. The family conference room was on the 4th floor, tucked between pediatrics and oncology. Claire had been inside it exactly once, during orientation 6 years ago. It was designed for difficult conversations, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, boxes of tissues strategically placed. Vice Admiral Marcus Winters was already there when she arrived. So was Sophia, looking significantly better than she had 12 hours ago. And sitting in the corner, taking notes on a tablet, was someone Claire didn't recognize. A woman in her 40s wearing a Navy uniform with more medals than Claire could count. The Admiral stood when Claire entered. "Nurse Donovan, thank you for coming. This is Commander Valerie Brooks from Naval Medical Oversight." Claire's stomach dropped further. "Am I in trouble?" "Quite the opposite," Commander Brooks said. "Please, sit." Claire sat. Her hands were shaking again. The Admiral remained standing. "I called this meeting because I owe you an apology. For 13 months, I watched my daughter suffer, and I trusted the doctors who were failing her. I brought in specialists. I demanded answers, but I never once thought to listen to the nurses. I never considered that the people with the least authority might have the clearest view. Sir, you don't need to—" "I do, because my prejudice nearly cost Sophia her life, and I want you to know that I see that now." He paused. "I also want you to know that I've filed formal complaints against Dr. Ashford, Dr. Vance, and 14 other physicians involved in Sophia's care. Commander Brooks is here to explain what that means." Brooks set down her tablet. Summit Ridge receives federal funding because they treat military families. That funding comes with oversight requirements. When a vice admiral alleges systematic negligence in the care of his dependent daughter, we're obligated to investigate. That investigation began this morning at 0600 hours. Claire looked at Sophia, who was watching her father with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. "How extensive is this investigation?" Claire asked carefully. "Complete chart review for every patient treated by the implicated physicians over the last 3 years, interviews with nursing staff, analysis of diagnostic protocols, and a full audit of how Summit Ridge handles cases where nurses raise concerns that are subsequently dismissed." Brooks met Claire's eyes. "Your testimony will be central to that audit." "My testimony." "You documented your concerns, you attempted to work through proper channels, you were shut down by multiple attending physicians. That's a pattern we take very seriously." Claire's mouth had gone dry. "What happens to the doctors if you find they were negligent?" "Loss of privileges to treat military families, possible censure. In extreme cases, referral to state medical boards for license review." Brooks's expression was granite. "We protect our people, Nurse Donovan. When a system fails them, we dismantle that system." The room fell quiet. Claire could hear her own heartbeat. Sophia spoke softly. "Claire, you don't have to do this. If you want to walk away, no one would blame you." Claire looked at the young woman whose life she'd saved. Then at the Admiral who'd weaponized his rank to demand justice. Then at Commander Brooks, who represented the full weight of military accountability. "What do you need from me?" Claire asked. Brooks smiled. It wasn't warm, but it was approving. "The truth. All of it. Every dismissal, every condescending comment, every time you were told to stay in your lane. We need it documented, dated, and signed." "When?" "Today, if possible. The faster we move, the less time Summit Ridge has to sanitize the record." Claire nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it." The Admiral extended his hand. Claire stood and shook it. His grip was firm, military precise. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing my daughter when everyone else looked through her." Claire's throat was too tight to respond. She just nodded. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes. Logistics, timelines, promises of legal protection. When it finally ended, Claire walked out feeling like she'd just enlisted in a war she hadn't known was coming. Sophia caught up with her in the hallway. "Hey, wait!" Claire turned. "You should be resting." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. My head feels clear for the first time in years." Sophia smiled, but it faded quickly. "Are you okay with this?" "Really?" "Does it matter? It's happening whether I'm okay with it or not." "It matters to me." Claire leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted again despite a full night's sleep. "I'm terrified. I just agreed to testify against doctors who could destroy my career with a few well-placed phone calls. I'm going to make enemies of people I've worked with for years, and I have no idea if any of this will actually change anything." "But you're doing it anyway." "Because someone has to. And apparently that someone is me." Sophia reached out and squeezed Claire's hand. "My father meant what he said. You're protected. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Claire wanted to believe that, but she'd worked in hospitals long enough to know that protection only lasted as long as it was convenient. They walked back to the recovery wing together. Nina was waiting outside Sophia's room, her expression troubled. We have a problem, Nina said without preamble. What kind of problem? Sophia asked. The kind where Dr. Ashford just gave an interview to Philadelphia Metro News claiming he was scapegoated for a difficult case and that his administrative leave is politically motivated. Claire felt ice flood her veins. He what? Nina pulled up a video on her phone. The screen showed Dr. Raymond Ashford standing outside Summit Ridge, looking composed and professional. Miss Winter's case was extraordinarily complex, his recorded voice said. We pursued every reasonable diagnostic avenue. Unfortunately, her father used his military connections to pressure the hospital into finding someone to blame when the reality is that medicine isn't perfect. Sometimes patients don't improve despite our best efforts. The reporter's voice cut in. But sources say an outside consultant diagnosed the problem in less than 24 hours. With the benefit of hindsight and access to the full case file, Dr. Reeves is a talented surgeon, but she had information we didn't. Suggesting that my team was negligent is both inaccurate and deeply unfair to the physicians who worked tirelessly on this case. The video ended. Claire stared at the blank screen, rage building in her chest like a living thing. He's lying, she said flatly. He's standing there lying, and people are going to believe him. Nina's jaw was tight. He's controlling the narrative before we can. Smart move, actually. Evil, but smart. So what do we do? Sophia pulled out her own phone. We tell the truth. All of it. Right now. She opened her social media and started typing. Claire watched over her shoulder as Sophia's words appeared on screen. My name is Sophia Winters. For 13 months, I was told my illness was psychological. I was dismissed, medicated, and ignored while I lost my hair, my health, and nearly my life. The doctors at Summit Ridge Medical Center failed me. Not because the diagnosis was difficult, but because they refused to listen. This is my story. She hit post. Within seconds, comments started flooding in. Within minutes, it had been shared 50 times. Within an hour, it would be viral. And Summit Ridge Medical Center's carefully controlled narrative was about to explode. Within 90 minutes, Sophia's post had 40,000 shares and climbing. The comments section became a flood. Other patients sharing their own stories of dismissal, nurses recounting times they'd been ignored, medical students admitting they'd been taught to discount nursing observations. Philadelphia Metro News pulled Dr. Ashford's interview from their website and issued a statement promising a fuller investigation. 3 national networks requested interviews by noon. Summit Ridge's PR department went into crisis mode. Claire watched it unfold from the nurse's station, her phone buzzing with notifications she didn't know how to process. Nina stood beside her, monitoring the feeds with the focus of a general watching battlefield reports. This is accelerating faster than I expected, Nina said quietly. Is that good or bad? Depends on how the hospital responds. If they try to suppress this, it'll explode. If they get ahead of it and own the failures, they might survive. Eleanor Hutchins chose the latter. At 2 p.m., Summit Ridge released a statement that made Claire's hands go numb. It was posted on every platform simultaneously, their website, social media, sent directly to news outlets. Summit Ridge Medical Center acknowledges serious failures in the care of Sophia Winters. We have placed 2 senior physicians on administrative leave pending investigation. We are implementing immediate protocol changes to ensure nursing observations receive appropriate weight in diagnostic decisions. We are cooperating fully with federal oversight. Most importantly, we apologize to Miss Winters and her family for the suffering our failures caused. We can and will do better. The statement was signed by Eleanor Hutchins herself. She's sacrificing the doctors to save the institution, Nina observed. Will it work? Probably. She's admitting fault before anyone can accuse her of covering up. Smart politics. Nina's expression was unreadable. Also means Ashford and Vance are finished. Hutchins just threw them to the wolves. Down the hall, Claire could hear raised voices. She recognized one of them, Dr. Patricia Vance, her tone shrill with fury. The other was Judith Carmichael, the night supervisor, trying to maintain order. Claire moved toward the sound instinctively. She found them outside the staff lounge. Dr. Vance had Judith backed against the wall, her face flushed red. This is character assassination, Vance spat. That statement makes it sound like we deliberately harmed that girl. We followed protocols. We did everything. You followed the wrong protocols, Claire said. Both women spun. Vance's eyes went wide, then narrow. You. This is your fault. You and that sanctimonious outside consultant. You couldn't handle being told no, so you went around proper channels, and now you've destroyed 2 careers. Claire felt something cold settle in her chest. I destroyed nothing. You did that yourself when you dismissed a patient's symptoms for 13 months. We didn't dismiss them. We investigated. Exhaustively. Just because the diagnosis wasn't what you expected doesn't mean we failed. She had a fractured skull. It showed up on one targeted scan. How many scans did you order that missed it? Vance stepped closer. You have no idea what it's like making life and death decisions with incomplete information. You take vitals and follow orders. I make diagnoses that determine whether people live or die. That responsibility is mine, not yours, so don't you dare stand there and lecture me about failure when you've never carried that weight. You're right, Claire said softly. I've never carried that weight, but I've watched you drop it, repeatedly, onto patients who trusted you. Vance's hand came up fast. For a moment, Claire thought she was actually going to be hit, but Judith caught Vance's wrist. Dr. Vance, my office, now. Vance jerked her arm free. She looked at Claire with something close to hatred. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. Vance left. Judith gave Claire a long look, part warning, part something else Claire couldn't identify, then followed. Claire stood alone in the hallway, adrenaline making her hands shake. Nina appeared from around the corner. I heard that, Nina said. You okay? She almost hit me. I know, I saw, which means there are now 2 witnesses if she tries to claim otherwise. Claire laughed, but it sounded brittle even to her own ears. This is insane. 48 hours ago, I was just a nurse. Now I'm in the middle of a federal investigation and getting threatened in hallways. Welcome to systemic change. It's messy and personal, and nobody comes out clean. Nina's expression softened slightly. But you're doing the right thing. Don't lose sight of that. The right thing might cost me everything I've built here. Then you'll build something better somewhere else. Before Claire could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. This is Claire Donovan. Miss Donovan, my name is Teresa Galloway. I'm a producer for National Health Watch. We'd like to interview you about the Sophia Winters case. Would you be available tomorrow morning? Claire's stomach flipped. I don't think that's appropriate while the investigation is ongoing. I understand your hesitation, but Dr. Ashford has already agreed to a sit-down interview. If you don't tell your side of the story, his version becomes the official record. Claire closed her eyes. What time tomorrow? 9 a.m. at our Philadelphia studio. We'll send a car. I need to clear it with the hospital administration first. Of course. But Miss Donovan, the nursing community is watching this case very closely. What you did, standing up to attending physicians who dismissed you, that matters to a lot of people. Don't let that story go untold. The call ended. Claire stood there holding her phone, feeling the weight of something enormous settling on her shoulders. Nina was watching her. Media interview? National Health Watch. Tomorrow morning, if I can get clearance. Do it. Ashford's already controlling the narrative. You need to counter it. I'm terrified of saying the wrong thing. Then we prep. Right now. Let's go. They commandeered an empty conference room and spent the next 3 hours running through potential questions. Nina was relentless, pushing Claire on every detail, making her practice answers until they were sharp and clear. Don't apologize for going over Ashford's head, Nina coached. You saw a patient in crisis and you acted. That's not insubordination. That's clinical judgment. What if they ask why I didn't trust the other doctors? Because 13 months of failure earned your distrust. Be specific. Use Sophia's symptoms. Make it concrete. They drilled until Claire's voice was hoarse. By the time they finished, night had fallen outside the windows. Claire checked her phone and found 17 missed calls. 3 from unknown numbers. 2 from the hospital's legal department. 1 from Vice Admiral Winters. She called the Admiral back first. Nurse Donovan, thank you for returning my call. I wanted to inform you that Commander Brooks has accelerated the investigation timeline. The audit team arrives tomorrow afternoon. Claire's heart sank. That fast? The Navy doesn't waste time when negligence is alleged. They'll want to interview you extensively. I've arranged for a military attorney to be present if you'd like one. Is that necessary? It's prudent. You're not under investigation, but your testimony will be used in actions against others. Having counsel ensures you're protected. Claire rubbed her eyes. Okay, yes, thank you. One more thing. Sophia's post has generated significant attention. We're receiving media requests by the hour. Some of them are legitimate. Others are looking for scandal. Be careful who you trust. I already agreed to an interview with National Health Watch. There was a pause. That's a reputable program, but you should have representation there too. I'll have my attorney contact you. Admiral, you don't need to. Miss Donovan, you put yourself at considerable risk to help my daughter. The least I can do is ensure you're not destroyed in the aftermath. Accept the help. The call ended before Claire could argue further. She made it home past midnight, exhausted and wired simultaneously. Her apartment felt foreign, like she'd been gone weeks instead of days. She tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dr. Vance's furious face, heard Dr. Ashford's smooth lies on camera, felt the weight of what was coming. At 4 a.m., she gave up and made coffee. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're making powerful people very angry. Be careful. A friend. Claire stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it and turned off her phone. Morning came gray and cold. The car from National Health Watch arrived at 8:30, driven by a professional who said nothing during the 40-minute drive to the studio. Claire spent the ride reviewing her notes, Nina's coaching echoing in her head. The studio was smaller than she expected, more intimate. The producer, Teresa Galloway, met her in the green room, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. Thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult. I just want to tell the truth. That's all we're asking for. The interview will be about 20 minutes. We'll edit it down to 12 for broadcast. Just be yourself and answer honestly. Claire nodded, not trusting her voice. The set was a simple two-chair arrangement against a neutral background. The interviewer was Marcus Holland, a veteran journalist Claire recognized from national broadcasts. He stood when she entered, shook her hand warmly. Miss Donovan, thank you for your time. I promise to be fair. They sat. Lights adjusted. Someone counted down. And then it began. You're a nurse at Summit Ridge Medical Center in Philadelphia, Marcus started. How long have you worked there? 6 years. And in those 6 years, have you ever gone over an attending physician's head to request outside consultation? No, never. So what made Sophia Winter's case different? Claire took a breath. She was dying in front of me, not dramatically, not in a way that showed up on monitors, but I watched her fade over multiple shifts and I knew something was being missed. When I found the scar tissue and connected it to her old injury, I brought it to the attending physicians. They dismissed it without investigation. Why do you think they dismissed it? Because I'm a nurse, and in their view, nurses observe. We don't diagnose. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Dr. Ashford has stated that his team pursued every reasonable avenue, that the diagnosis was extraordinarily difficult. Do you agree? No. The diagnosis was straightforward once someone actually asked about head trauma. The difficulty was getting physicians to consider they might have missed something. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact. I brought my concerns to Dr. Ashford and Dr. Vance. Both dismissed them. I can provide timestamps, witness statements, and my own clinical notes showing exactly when and how I was shut down. You eventually contacted Dr. Nina Reeves at Johns Hopkins. Why her? Because I knew she'd listen. We trained together. I trusted her clinical judgment and her willingness to consider alternative diagnoses. And she found the problem in less than 24 hours. She found it in 9 hours. One targeted scan. That's all it took. Marcus was quiet for a moment, letting that sink in. What do you say to people who argue you overstepped your role? That you undermined the chain of command? Claire met his eyes directly. I say patient care matters more than hierarchy. If the chain of command is killing people, it needs to be broken. The interview continued. Marcus asked about the aftermath, the investigation, the media attention. Claire answered carefully, sticking to facts, refusing to be baited into emotional responses. When it ended, she felt drained but steady. Teresa walked her out personally. That was excellent, honest, clear. You should be proud. When does it air? Tomorrow night, primetime, 8 p.m. Eastern. Claire nodded numbly. Tomorrow night, millions of people would hear her accuse Summit Ridge's top physicians of negligence. There would be no walking it back. She was driven back to the hospital, where Commander Brooks and her audit team had already begun their work. The fourth-floor conference room had been converted into a command center, 3 investigators with laptops and boxes of files, pulling everything related to Sophia's case and dozens of others. Brooks saw Claire enter and waved her over. Nurse Donovan, good timing. We need your statement. The interview lasted 4 hours. They walked through every interaction, every dismissed concern, every time Claire had documented something the physicians ignored. A court reporter transcribed everything. The military attorney the Admiral had sent, a sharp woman named Captain Lisa Morgan, sat beside Claire and occasionally interjected when questions became repetitive. "How many times did you attempt to raise concerns about Miss Winters' symptoms?" one investigator asked. "Documented? 7 times over 2 weeks. Undocumented conversations? At least a dozen more." "And the responses you received?" "Ranged from dismissive to hostile. Dr. Ashford told me to stick to nursing. Dr. Vance suggested I was overstepping. A resident implied I was creating problems where none existed." "Did you ever feel your job was threatened?" Claire hesitated. Captain Morgan leaned forward slightly, a silent reminder she was protected. "Not explicitly, but the message was clear. Challenge the doctors too many times and you become a problem." The investigator made a note. "We'll need the names of everyone who dismissed your concerns." Claire provided them. 14 physicians, 6 residents, 2 department heads. Each name felt like a stone dropping into water, sending ripples she couldn't predict. When the interview finally concluded, Brooke stood and extended her hand. "Thank you for your cooperation. Your testimony is invaluable." "What happens now?" "We continue reviewing cases, interview other nursing staff, build a comprehensive picture of how Summit Ridge handles or mishandles diagnostic challenges. This isn't just about Sophia Winters anymore. It's about systemic failure." Claire left the conference room feeling hollowed out. She found Nina in Sophia's room, both women watching the news on the wall-mounted television. Dr. Ashford's face filled the screen. "Never intended to minimize Miss Winters' suffering," he was saying. "But diagnoses sometimes take time. Medicine is an art as much as a science. We did our best with the information available." Sophia muted it. "He's still lying." "He's protecting himself," Nina corrected. "Tomorrow, when Claire's interview airs, that protection evaporates." "Unless people believe him instead," Claire said. Both women turned. Sophia's expression softened. "How did it go?" "I told the truth. Whether anyone believes it is out of my hands now." Nina's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, then showed the screen to Claire. It was an email from Summit Ridge's legal department. "All staff involved in the Sophia Winters case are hereby prohibited from discussing it publicly pending the conclusion of internal and federal investigations. Violation of this directive may result in termination and legal action." "That's a gag order," Nina said flatly. "Can they do that?" Sophia asked. "They can try. Whether it's enforceable is another question." Nina looked at Claire. "Did you sign anything when you agreed to the National Health Watch interview?" "No, nothing." "Then you're clear. The interview was recorded before this directive. But Claire, you need to be careful going forward. They're scared and desperate. That makes them dangerous." As if summoned by the observation, Claire's phone rang. Eleanor Hutchins. Claire answered on speaker. "This is Claire Donovan." "Miss Donovan, I've just been informed you gave a media interview without clearing it through our communications department. I was asked to share my perspective on patient care. I did. That interview airs tomorrow night, and it will be seen as an official statement from Summit Ridge staff. You've put this hospital in an untenable position." "With respect, Ms. Hutchins, I put myself in that position, not the hospital." There was a long pause. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was colder. "We'll discuss this further tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office." The call ended. Nina whistled low. "She's pissed." "Let her be. I'm not backing down." Sophia looked worried. "Claire, what if they fire you?" "Then I'll find another job. But I won't let Ashford's lies become the official record." The rest of the day passed in tense waiting. Claire returned to her regular duties, taking vitals and administering medications, trying to pretend everything was normal. But other nurses watched her differently now, some with admiration, others with barely concealed resentment. She'd broken the unspoken rules, made waves, and in a hospital, making waves could drown you. At 7 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This one made her blood run cold. "You think you're a hero. You're just a troublemaker who will be unemployed and unemployable within a week. Enjoy your 15 minutes." She showed it to Nina, who immediately forwarded it to Captain Morgan. "This is witness intimidation," Nina said, "possibly illegal depending on who sent it." "Could it be Ashford?" "Could be anyone. Vance. One of the residents you named, someone from the hospital who thinks you're destroying their reputation. Claire pocketed her phone, feeling sick. This is getting out of control. No, this is what accountability looks like when people who've never faced consequences suddenly do. They lash out. Nina's expression was granite. Don't let them intimidate you. That night, Claire barely slept again. She kept checking her phone, half expecting more threats. Instead, she found her social media flooded with messages. Most were supportive, nurses from across the country sharing their own stories of being dismissed, thanking her for speaking up. But others were vicious, accusations that she was fame-seeking, destroying good doctors' careers, lying for attention. She stopped reading at 2 a.m. and stared at her ceiling instead. Morning came with fresh anxiety. The meeting with Eleanor Hutchins loomed. Claire dressed carefully, professionally, then drove to Summit Ridge feeling like she was heading to her own execution. Eleanor's office was exactly as intimidating as before, but this time the CEO wasn't alone. David Marsh from legal sat to her right, and on her left was someone Claire didn't recognize. An older man in an expensive suit with the look of someone who specialized in making problems disappear. Miss Donovan, this is Robert Kerrigan, our external counsel. Claire sat. Am I being fired? Eleanor's expression was unreadable. That depends on what you say in the next 10 minutes. Kerrigan leaned forward. Miss Donovan, your interview with National Health Watch airs tonight. We've seen an advance copy. In it, you make several accusations against Summit Ridge physicians. Accusations that could be construed as defamatory. They're not accusations, they're documented facts. Documentation doesn't prevent legal action. Dr. Ashford is considering a lawsuit for defamation and tortious interference with his career. Claire felt her hands go cold. Let him sue. I have witnesses, clinical notes, timestamps. Everything I said is provable. Provable in court, perhaps, but lawsuits are expensive, time-consuming, damaging to everyone involved. Kerrigan slid a document across the desk. We'd like to propose an alternative. Claire didn't touch it. What kind of alternative? Summit Ridge will issue a joint statement with you. We acknowledge diagnostic challenges in Miss Winter's case. You acknowledge that medical decisions are complex and that no malice was intended. Both sides move forward. The interview doesn't air. You want me to help cover this up. We want to avoid unnecessary litigation that benefits no one. Claire looked at Eleanor. Is this coming from you? Eleanor's expression flickered, something that might have been regret or respect. The board thinks it's the cleanest resolution. And if I refuse, Kerrigan answered, then you face Dr. Ashford's lawsuit as an individual. Without institutional support, your legal fees alone could bankrupt you. Claire stood. Then I'll be bankrupt. But I won't lie. Miss Donovan, that interview airs tonight, every word of it. Because Sophia Winters deserves to have her story told, and nurses everywhere deserve to know they're not crazy when they see things doctors miss. She looked directly at Eleanor. You can fire me. You can let Ashford sue me, but you can't make me silent. She walked out before anyone could respond. In the hallway, her hands were shaking so badly she had to lean against the wall. Nina found her there 5 minutes later. I heard. You okay? I just committed career suicide. You committed to the truth. There's a difference. Claire's phone rang. Captain Morgan. Miss Donovan, I've been informed Summit Ridge attempted to pressure you into retracting your interview. Is that accurate? Yes. And your response? I refused. Good. Because as of 20 minutes ago, the naval investigation has been expanded to include potential obstruction. Summit Ridge's attempt to silence you is now part of the official record. Claire felt something shift in her chest. They tried to bury this and it made things worse. Considerably worse. For them. Morgan's voice held a note of satisfaction. Your interview airs in 11 hours. I'd stay somewhere safe tonight. Things are about to get very loud. The day crawled by. Claire tried to work but was pulled aside by Judith Carmichael at noon and told to take the rest of the day off. For your own safety, Judith said, though her expression suggested it was more about Summit Ridge's liability if something happened. Claire went to Sophia's room instead. The young woman was sitting up, looking stronger every hour. Her father stood by the window on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Claire, Sophia said warmly, I heard what happened. You turned them down. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You just keep choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. The Admiral ended his call and turned. Nurse Donovan. I've just spoken with Admiral Patricia Hendricks from Naval Medical Command. She wanted me to convey her personal support for your actions. Whatever fallout comes from tonight's broadcast, you have the full backing of naval oversight. Claire felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Ashford's attorney contacted mine an hour ago. He's filing for defamation, interference, and emotional distress. He's asking for $5 million in damages. The room spun. Claire sat down hard. $5 million? He's trying to destroy you financially so you can't fight back. It's a silencing tactic. The Admiral's expression was cold fury. It won't work. I've retained a firm specializing in medical whistleblower defense. They're representing you pro bono. Why would they do that? Because what you've done matters, and because I asked them to. Nina entered, slightly breathless. The interview just dropped early online. National Health Watch posted it an hour ago. All four of them crowded around Nina's phone. Claire watched herself on screen, looking pale but steady, answering Marcus Holland's questions with quiet conviction. The comments were already exploding, thousands of them, most supportive, some calling her a liar, others sharing their own stories of medical dismissal. And then, at 3 p.m., everything changed. A notification flashed across the screen. Breaking news from Philadelphia Metro News. Summit Ridge. Physician under criminal investigation for patient endangerment. Nina clicked through. The article was brief but devastating. Dr. Raymond Ashford, recently placed on administrative leave from Summit Ridge Medical Center, is now under criminal investigation by the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. The investigation, prompted by federal audit findings, will examine whether Dr. Ashford's handling of patient Sophia Winters' case rises to the level of reckless endangerment. If convicted, he faces up to 10 years in prison and permanent loss of medical license. Claire read it twice, unable to process. Criminal charges. They're actually charging him. The DA must have seen the federal audit preliminary findings, the Admiral said. If they show deliberate negligence, not just diagnostic error, but willful disregard for patient welfare, that's criminal. Sophia's hands were shaking. This is really happening. Nina's phone rang. She answered, listened for 30 seconds, then hung up, looking stunned. That was the DA's office. They want to interview Clare and Sophia tomorrow. They're building a case. The room fell silent except for the hum of medical equipment and the distant sounds of the hospital. Claire felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the ground crumble beneath her feet. What had started as one nurse refusing to be silent had become a federal investigation, media firestorm, and now criminal prosecution. She looked at Sophia, who was staring at her own hands like they belonged to someone else. I just wanted to get better, Sophia whispered. I didn't want to destroy anyone. You didn't destroy anything, Claire said firmly. You exposed what was already broken. The Admiral's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went very still. What? Nina asked. Dr. Patricia Vance just resigned, effective immediately. She released a statement saying she can't work in an environment where clinical judgment is second-guessed by non-physicians. Claire laughed, but it sounded hollow. She's running before the criminal investigation reaches her. Smart move, actually, Nina said. Resignation doesn't stop the investigation, but it might limit institutional liability. Another notification, this time on Claire's phone. A statement from the Pennsylvania Nurses Association. We stand with Clare Donovan and all nurses who advocate for patient safety in the face of institutional resistance. Her courage represents the best of our profession. Then another, from the American Medical Association. While we support physician autonomy in diagnostic decisions, we condemn any attempts to silence legitimate concerns raised by healthcare professionals. Patient safety must always come first. The floodgates had opened. By 6 p.m., 17 professional organizations had issued statements. 9 supported Clare. 4 supported the physicians. 3 called for independent review. 1 demanded Summit Ridge's immediate closure pending investigation. At 7:30, Clare's interview aired on national television. 12 million people watched her explain in quiet, devastating detail how Sophia Winters had been failed by doctors too arrogant to listen. By 8, Dr. Ashford's defamation lawsuit was withdrawn. His attorney released a terse statement citing evolving circumstances. By 9, Summit Ridge's board of directors announced Eleanor Hutchins would be stepping down as CEO effective at month's end. and at 9:47 p.m., Claire received a text from an unknown number that made everything before it seem insignificant. You wanted the truth? Check your email. Someone who's been watching Claire opened her email with shaking hands. The message was from an encrypted account. The subject line read, "The Montana Clinic." The attachment was a PDF. Claire opened it. It was a medical board complaint filed 16 years ago against Dr. Marcus Webb of Helena, Montana. The complaint alleged Dr. Webb had performed patient examinations while intoxicated. It included witness statements, timestamps, and a photo of Dr. Webb, the same doctor who'd cleared 17-year-old Sophia Winters after her horseback fall. The complaint had been dismissed. Insufficient evidence. Dr. Webb had continued practicing for another decade before retiring. But attached to the complaint was something else, a list of patients Dr. Webb had examined in the 6 months surrounding Sophia's fall. 12 names, and next to each name, a note about their outcomes. 4 had developed complications from misdiagnoses. 2 had died. Claire's hands were numb. She showed the email to Nina, who read it and went pale. "Someone's been digging," Nina said quietly. "Deep." The Admiral read it over their shoulders. His jaw was granite. This proves Sophia's initial misdiagnosis wasn't an isolated error. It was part of a pattern. "And if the DA gets this," Claire said slowly, "it connects Sophia's case to a much bigger failure. Not just Summit Ridge, the whole system." Nina looked at Claire. "Who sent this to you?" "I don't know." Another text arrived, same unknown number. "This is just the beginning. More coming tomorrow. Don't trust anyone at Summit Ridge. Not even the ones who seem like allies." Claire showed it to the room. Sophia had gone very quiet. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Not even allies." Before anyone could answer, the hospital's fire alarm erupted into ear-splitting sound. The fire alarm screamed through Summit Ridge's 4th floor like something alive and furious. Red emergency lights strobed across walls and faces. The overhead sprinklers held steady. No smoke yet, which meant either false alarm or something contained elsewhere in the building. The Admiral moved first, his military training overriding civilian panic. "Nina, get Sophia mobile. Claire, check the hallway." Claire was already at the door. She pushed it open to chaos. Nurses were evacuating patients from rooms, some on gurneys, others shuffling on their own. Judith Carmichael stood at the central station, phone pressed to her ear, her expression tight with controlled urgency. "Where's the fire?" Claire called over the alarm. Judith covered her other ear. "Records department. 3rd floor. Security's investigating." Claire's stomach dropped. The records department, where every file related to Sophia's case was stored. She looked back at Nina, who'd already reached the same conclusion. Their eyes met across the room. "That's not a coincidence," Nina said. The Admiral had his phone out, already dialing. "Captain Morgan needs to know. If those records burn—" "Everything's digital," Claire interrupted. "Backed up off-site, hospital policy." "Physical files can still contain notes and documentation that never made it into the system," Nina countered. "Handwritten observations, margin comments, the kind of details that show what doctors were actually thinking." Sophia was sitting up now, fully alert despite the post-surgical restrictions. "Someone's trying to destroy evidence." The alarm cut off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence that felt worse than the noise. Judith's voice carried clearly now. "All clear. False alarm. Repeat. All clear. Return to normal operations." But her face told a different story. Claire approached the station. "What really happened?" Judith hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Small fire in a record storage room. Contained quickly. Security found accelerant residue. Arson. Suspected. Police are on their way." Judith's eyes flicked to Sophia's room. "Get your patient somewhere safe. This building isn't secure." Nina was already moving Sophia toward the wheelchair when the elevator chimed. The doors opened to reveal 2 uniformed Philadelphia police officers and a woman in a dark suit carrying a federal badge. The woman scanned the hallway, found Claire, and walked directly toward her. "Claire Donovan?" "Yes." "Special Agent Kimberly Ross, FBI. We need to talk. Now." Claire felt her world tilt again. "FBI?" "Arson at a facility under federal investigation constitutes obstruction of justice. That brings us in." Agent Ross looked at the Admiral. "Vice Admiral Winters, your presence is requested as well." They were escorted to a commandeered conference room on the 5th floor, away from the records damage. Agent Ross was joined by 2 other agents who immediately began setting up recording equipment. This is being documented, Ross explained. Everything you say becomes part of the official record. Clare sat between Nina and Captain Morgan, who'd arrived within minutes of being called. The Admiral sat across from them, his expression unreadable. Ross pulled up a tablet. At 9:52 p.m., someone entered Summit Ridge's third-floor records department using an employee access card. They disabled the smoke detector in storage room 3C, poured accelerant over 4 filing cabinets, and ignited them. The fire was contained within 7 minutes, but significant damage was done to physical files. She turned the tablet to show security footage. A figure in scrubs and a surgical cap, face obscured, moving quickly through dim corridors. "Can you identify this person?" Ross asked. Clare studied the footage. The build suggested male, medium height. The gait was purposeful but not hurried. Someone who belonged here, who wouldn't draw attention. No. But the way they move, they know this hospital. Employee or someone posing as one. "How did they get an access card?" the Admiral asked. "Stolen or cloned? We're reviewing badge logs now." Ross pulled up another image, the burned filing cabinets, their contents reduced to ash and melted plastic. These cabinets contained historical patient files, including one Sophia Winters spanning 7 years of on and off treatment at Summit Ridge. Nina leaned forward. "What about digital records?" "Intact, but here's what's interesting." Ross showed another photo, a file cabinet that hadn't burned sitting 3 feet from the others. This cabinet contains physician notes and internal communications from the last 18 months. It wasn't touched. Whoever did this was selective. "They wanted Sophia's old records destroyed," Clare said slowly, "the ones that might show earlier missed opportunities to diagnose her. Or show who knew what and when," the Admiral added, his voice hard. Ross nodded. "Which brings me to my next question. Who benefits from those records disappearing?" The room fell silent. "Anyone involved in her care over the last 7 years," Nina said finally. "Residents who rotated through, specialists who consulted briefly, even administrative staff who might have flagged concerns that were never escalated." "That's dozens of people," Ross said. "But someone was desperate enough to commit federal arson tonight, someone who knew exactly which files to burn." She looked directly at Clare. "Earlier today, you received an encrypted email. May I see it?" Clare pulled out her phone with shaking hands and showed Ross the Montana Clinic documents. Ross read in silence, her expression darkening. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know. Anonymous sender. And the timing, hours before someone tries to burn Sophia's old records, doesn't strike you as connected?" Claire's mouth went dry. "You think whoever sent this started the fire? Or whoever's mentioned in these documents realized they were about to be exposed and panicked?" Ross forwarded the email to herself. "This Dr. Marcus Webb, he cleared Sophia after her horseback fall?" "According to her recollection, yes. And these other patients he misdiagnosed. Do you know if any were treated subsequently at Summit Ridge?" No one answered. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Ross stood. "I'm seizing all remaining physical records related to Sophia Winters' care, and I'm formally requesting that all of you remain available for further questioning." She looked at Clare and Sophia. "I'm also recommending protective custody until we identify who's targeting this investigation." "Protective custody?" Sophia repeated. "Someone just committed arson to hide evidence. They're not going to stop because we're asking questions." Ross pulled out business cards, distributed them. "Call me immediately if anything unusual happens. Anything." She left with her team, taking the physical evidence and the security footage. The conference room felt cavernous in their absence. Captain Morgan broke the silence first. "The Admiral and I can arrange secure accommodation. Military housing, off base, but protected." "I'm not hiding," Sophia said. "You're recovering from brain surgery and someone just tried to destroy records of your medical history. Hiding is the smart play." "Captain Morgan's right," the Admiral said quietly. "Sophia, this isn't about fear. It's about staying alive long enough to see justice done." Nina was staring at her phone, scrolling rapidly. "There's more. Someone just leaked internal Summit Ridge communications to the press." She turned her screen to show an article posted minutes ago on Philadelphia Metro News' website. Internal emails reveal Summit Ridge physicians discussed sedating difficult patient. Sophia Winters, Clare felt sick reading the excerpts. Dr. Ashford to Dr. Vance, patient's father is becoming a problem. Recommend increasing psych meds to manage his expectations. Dr. Vance's response, already maximized dosing. Consider referring to inpatient psychiatric. "They wanted to commit her," Sophia whispered. They wanted to lock me away because my father kept demanding answers. The Admiral's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. When he spoke, his voice was controlled but vibrating with rage. They saw you as an inconvenience, a PR problem, and their solution was imprisonment. Who leaked this? Claire asked. Nina scrolled further. Article credits an anonymous hospital insider with access to executive communications. Someone inside Summit Ridge's administration is burning the place down. Claire's phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. More coming at midnight. They can't hide what they've done. Watch the news. She showed it to the room. Whoever this is, Captain Morgan said slowly, they have access to everything, records, emails, security protocols. That suggests someone very high up. Or someone in IT with root access, Nina countered. The Admiral stood abruptly. We're leaving. All of us. Now. Nina, can Sophia be safely transported? She's 4 days post-op. Not ideal, but manageable if we're careful. Then pack what she needs. We're moving to secure location within the hour. He looked at Claire. You're coming too. This isn't a request. Claire wanted to argue, but exhaustion and fear won. Okay. They moved quickly. Nina supervised Sophia's transfer to a wheelchair while Claire gathered medical supplies. The Admiral made calls, his voice clipped and commanding. Within 30 minutes, 2 black SUVs pulled up to Summit Ridge's staff entrance. The vehicles were driven by Navy personnel in civilian clothes, armed and alert. They loaded Sophia first, then Nina, then Claire. The Admiral rode in the second vehicle with Captain Morgan. They drove through Philadelphia's late-night streets in silence, taking random turns and doubling back, counter-surveillance maneuvers Claire recognized from movies but had never expected to experience. The city looked different through bulletproof glass, more dangerous and beautiful all at once. 40 minutes later, they pulled into an underground garage beneath a nondescript building in a residential neighborhood. The space was empty except for 3 more vehicles and 2 armed guards. Where are we? Sophia asked. Navy Liaison Housing, the Admiral answered. Technically a diplomatic residence, fully secured, untraceable unless you already know it exists. They were escorted to the 3rd floor via freight elevator. The apartment was larger than Claire expected. 4 bedrooms, full kitchen, and a living area with windows overlooking the street. But the windows were thick, probably bulletproof, and cameras covered every angle of the exterior. Nina got Sophia settled in a bedroom with medical monitoring equipment that had somehow arrived before them. Claire was shown to another room, sparse but functional. She sat on the bed and finally allowed herself to shake. A knock on the door. The Admiral. May I come in? Claire nodded. He sat in the room's only chair, looking older than he had that morning. I need to tell you something. Before midnight, before whatever gets released, you need to hear this from me. Claire's stomach clenched. What? When Sophia first got sick, I pulled strings, called in favors, got her seen by the best specialists money and rank could access. I thought I was helping, but what I actually did was create an environment where those specialists felt immune to scrutiny. They knew they'd been personally requested by a vice admiral. They knew their professional reputations were tied to satisfying me. So when they couldn't diagnose her, they chose to blame her rather than admit failure to someone who could damage their careers. Claire absorbed this slowly. You think your involvement made it worse? I know it did. I turned my daughter's care into a political situation where the doctors were more concerned about managing me than healing her. And when you came along, a nurse with no rank, no connections, no power to threaten them, they dismissed you because you couldn't hurt them. His voice cracked slightly. I endangered my own daughter by trying to protect her. You couldn't have known. I should have. I've spent 30 years navigating military politics. I know how power corrupts judgment, but I was terrified and desperate, and I made everything worse. Claire moved to sit beside him. Then we fix it. We make sure the system that failed Sophia can't fail anyone else the same way. The Admiral looked at her with something like wonder. You're 29 years old, and you have more courage than most people I've commanded. How? I'm scared all the time. I just don't let it stop me. He smiled faintly. That's the definition of courage, Nurse Donovan. Captain Morgan appeared in the doorway. Sir, it's 11:58. Whatever's coming, it's about to break. They gathered in the living room. Nina had Sophia bundled in blankets on the couch, looking pale but alert. Claire sat beside them. The Admiral stood by the window, phone in hand. Captain Morgan pulled up news feeds on a laptop. At exactly midnight, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office released a statement. After reviewing evidence provided by federal investigators, this office is filing criminal charges against Dr. Raymond Ashford for reckless endangerment, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Dr. Patricia Vance is named as a co-conspirator. Additional charges are pending as the investigation continues. The statement was followed immediately by an unsealed grand jury indictment, 37 pages detailing a pattern of deliberate negligence, falsified records, and attempts to silence whistleblowers. Claire read it twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. They falsified records? Captain Morgan highlighted a section. Says here, Dr. Ashford altered clinical notes after Sophia's surgery to make it appear he'd considered occipital trauma earlier than he actually did. He backdated entries and had a resident co-sign them. That's fraud, Nina said flatly. Medical license revocation at minimum. Prison time at maximum. The Admiral's phone rang. He answered, listened, then put it on speaker. Agent Ross's voice filled the room. Are you watching the news? We're reading the indictment, the Admiral confirmed. Then you've seen the fraud charges. What you haven't seen yet is the arson suspect. We got him. Hospital security analyst named Marcus Peltier. He's been employed at Summit Ridge for 11 years, and according to his initial statement, he didn't act alone. Claire's breath caught. Who else? He's not talking yet, but his phone records show 17 calls to Dr. Ashford in the last 48 hours. We're bringing Ashford in for questioning within the hour. The line went dead. Nina was already pulling up news feeds. Every major outlet was breaking the story now. Summit Ridge was trending nationally. Claire's interview was being replayed with updated context. Sophia's social media post had been shared over 2 million times. And then, at 12:17 a.m., another email arrived in Claire's inbox. Same encrypted sender. The subject line read, "The real story." Claire opened it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The attachment was a video file, 47 minutes long. She hit play. The screen showed an interior office, Summit Ridge's executive suite, based on the visible logo. Dr. Raymond Ashford sat behind a desk, facing someone off camera. "Can't keep covering for you," a woman's voice said. Eleanor Hutchins. "You don't have a choice," Ashford replied. "If I go down, I take the hospital with me. Every shortcut you approved, every cost-cutting measure that compromised patient care, every time you told me to prioritize bed turnover over diagnostic thoroughness, all of it becomes public. That's blackmail. That's reality. You want me to take the fall for Sophia Winters? Fine, but I'm dragging you and this entire institution into the grave with me." The video cut to another scene, Dr. Vance and Ashford in a corridor. "The nurse won't stop," Vance said. "She's got the Admiral backing her now." "Then we discredit her, make it about her seeking attention, plant doubts about her clinical judgment." Ashford's expression was cold. "She's just a nurse. No one will choose her word over ours." More scenes. More conversations. A comprehensive record of conspiracy, arrogance, and callous disregard for patient welfare. The final scene was time-stamped 3 days ago. Ashford and Marcus Peltier in a parking garage. "The physical files need to disappear," Ashford said. "Can you make that happen?" "There are cameras everywhere, security logs." "You're head of security systems. Disable what needs to be disabled. Burn what needs to burn. I'll make sure you're compensated." Peltier hesitated, then nodded. "When?" "Soon, before the feds can subpoena them." The video ended. The room was absolutely silent. "Who filmed this?" Sophia finally whispered. Claire checked the email metadata. Nothing useful. But attached to the video was a text file. She opened it. "My name is David Marsh. I'm legal counsel for Summit Ridge Medical Center. For 2 years, I've watched this institution prioritize profit over patients. I've been ordered to draft settlements that silence victims. I've witnessed executives cover up negligence to protect revenue streams. When Sophia Winters' case broke, I saw a chance to do something right. I've been recording conversations and preserving evidence for months. This is everything. Use it. Burn them all. I'm gone by the time you read this." Claire looked up at the others, her vision blurring with tears. "The lawyer. The one who came to Sophia's room. He's been documenting everything." "Where is he now?" the Admiral asked. Captain Morgan was already typing. "David Marsh's personnel file shows he submitted resignation paperwork this afternoon. Effective immediately. Last known location, unknown." Nina pulled up the video file properties. This was uploaded to a cloud server with timed release. Even if they found him, the files are already distributed. Multiple copies, multiple servers. The Admiral's phone rang again. This time he didn't put it on speaker, but his expression shifted from grim to something harder as he listened. Understood. Yes. Immediately. He hung up and looked at the room. That was the Attorney General's office. The video you just watched was simultaneously delivered to the Philadelphia DA, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and every major news outlet in the country. It's going public in... He checked his watch. 4 minutes. Claire felt dizzy. This is going to destroy Summit Ridge. It's going to destroy everyone who chose institutional protection over patient care, the Admiral corrected, as it should. At 12:47 a.m., the video went live. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Social media exploded. News anchors scrambled to provide context. Legal experts began predicting outcomes. By 1 a.m., Eleanor Hutchins had been arrested at her home. Dr. Ashford was in federal custody. Marcus Peltier was cooperating fully in exchange for reduced charges. By 2 a.m., Summit Ridge's board of directors had called an emergency meeting and voted to suspend all non-emergency operations pending a complete institutional review. By 3 a.m., 17 other hospitals had announced they were reviewing their own protocols for handling nurse observations and patient advocacy. Claire watched it unfold from the secured apartment, feeling like she was witnessing an earthquake in slow motion. Everything she'd known about how hospitals functioned was fracturing. Nina brought her coffee. Neither of them would drink. You did this. David Marsh did this. He gave us the ammunition. You fired the shot when you refused to be silent. Nina sat beside her. How do you feel? Claire thought about it. Terrified, relieved, angry that it had to go this far, sad for all the patients who suffered before we caught it. That's a reasonable response to burning down a corrupt system. Sophia emerged from her bedroom, moving slowly but steadily. Can't sleep. Too much happening. Her father immediately moved to support her, but she waved him off gently. I'm okay, Dad. Actually okay. She sat on Claire's other side, the three women forming a line against the darkness outside. What happens now? Sophia asked. Trials, Captain Morgan said from across the room. Congressional hearings, probably. Massive civil litigation. Summit Ridge might not survive as an institution. Good, Sophia said simply. Let it burn. The Admiral's phone rang yet again. He glanced at it, frowned, then answered. This is Winters. His expression changed rapidly. Surprise, confusion, then something close to shock. He put it on speaker. Please confirm you can hear me, Admiral. The voice was unfamiliar to Claire, male, older, with the careful diction of someone used to being recorded. I can hear you, Mr. Secretary, the Admiral said. Secretary. Claire's mind raced. Secretary of what? I'm calling to inform you that the President has been briefed on the Sophia Winters case. Given the federal implications and the apparent systemic failures in military-adjacent medical facilities, she's ordered a task force to investigate patient safety protocols across all hospitals receiving federal funding. The Admiral's jaw tightened. That's a significant undertaking, sir. It's necessary. What happened to your daughter cannot happen to anyone else. The task force will have full investigative authority and unlimited resources. And Admiral, the President specifically requested that Nurse Clare Donovan be offered a position on the advisory panel. Claire's coffee cup slipped from her hands. Nina caught it. I'm sorry, Claire managed. What? You demonstrated the kind of clinical courage and patient advocacy we need shaping policy. Your insights would be invaluable. This is entirely voluntary, of course, but the invitation is sincere. Claire looked at the Admiral, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. The formal offer will be extended through official channels within 48 hours. For now, get some rest. You've earned it. The call ended. The room was silent except for the distant sound of Philadelphia traffic. Did that actually just happen? Sophia asked. Nina started laughing, not hysterical laughter, genuine, amazed laughter. You went from bedside nurse to presidential task force in 4 days. That might be a record. Claire felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. I just wanted to help one patient. You helped expose rot that's been festering in the medical system for decades, the Admiral said quietly. And now you have a chance to help fix it permanently. Captain Morgan raised her coffee cup. To Nurse Donovan, who proved that courage doesn't require rank. They toasted with coffee and water, an absurd celebration in a secured apartment at 4 a.m, but it felt right. Sophia's phone buzzed. She checked it, then went very still. What? Claire asked. Sophia turned the screen to show a text from an unknown number. Dr. Marcus Webb died 3 years ago. Natural causes. But his record survived, and they show something interesting. He wasn't drunk when he examined you. He was paid to clear you despite obvious trauma indicators. Paid by someone who wanted your fall classified as minor. Someone with money and influence. Someone in your family's orbit. I'll be in touch. The message ended there. Claire felt ice flood her veins. Who would pay a doctor to misdiagnose Sophia? The Admiral had gone completely white. When did your uncle take you to that Montana clinic? August 2019, right after the fall. Why? Because in August 2019, your Uncle Richard was negotiating a major defense contract that required security clearance renewal. If his niece had serious head trauma requiring extended hospitalization, it could have delayed the clearance process, cost him millions. Sophia stared at her father. You think Uncle Richard paid off the doctor? I think we need to find out, immediately. Captain Morgan was already on her phone. I'll get federal investigators on this. If Richard Winters bribed a physician to falsify a diagnosis, that's conspiracy to commit fraud. Federal charges. Nina looked sick. And it means Sophia's 7 years of suffering wasn't just medical negligence. It was deliberate sabotage. The apartment fell into stunned silence as the full implication settled over them. Someone in Sophia's own family had potentially engineered her misery for profit. Claire's phone buzzed one final time. Another message from the anonymous sender. You've uncovered the medical conspiracy. Now find the family one. They're connected. Dig deeper. Trust no one. The screen went dark. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. And somewhere in the city, someone who knew all the secrets was watching, waiting to see if Claire would follow the thread all the way to its source. The morning sun hadn't fully cleared Philadelphia's skyline when Captain Morgan ended her fourth call and turned to face the room with an expression that made everyone go silent. Richard Winters is currently in Washington, D.C., attending a defense appropriations hearing. Federal agents are moving to intercept him before he learns we're investigating. The Admiral stood motionless by the window, his reflection ghostly in the bulletproof glass. My own brother. He destroyed my daughter for a contract. Sophia's voice was barely audible. How long have you suspected? I didn't. Not until you showed me that message. He turned to face her and Claire saw something broken in his eyes. Richard called me 3 days after your fall, said he'd heard you'd had an accident but were fine, asked if it would affect my availability for an upcoming joint training exercise he was consulting on. I thought it was just him being Richard, self-absorbed, tactless. I never imagined that he'd paid a doctor to ensure I stayed broken, Sophia finished. Nina had been researching on her laptop, her expression growing darker by the minute. Dr. Marcus Webb received a $50,000 wire transfer on August 14, 2019, 3 days after Sophia's fall. The transfer came from a shell corporation registered in Delaware. That corporation's primary investor? RW Defense Solutions. Richard's company, the Admiral said flatly. Not just his company. Your company too, sir. You're listed as a minority shareholder. The Admiral's face went ashen. I invested when he first started, 20 years ago. I haven't been active in the business since I made Admiral. But your name is still on the paperwork, Captain Morgan said carefully. Which means, when this breaks, the optics will be complicated. Claire watched the realization hit him. They'll think I was involved. Or at minimum that you knew and did nothing. The press will connect you to the payoff whether you had knowledge or not. Sophia pushed herself up from the couch despite Nina's protest. Then we get ahead of it. We release a statement making it clear my father had no knowledge of what Uncle Richard did. Statements won't matter if the evidence shows otherwise, Captain Morgan said. We need to prove the Admiral's innocence before the accusation becomes public. Claire's phone buzzed again. The anonymous sender. Richard Winters kept records. Everything he paid for. Everyone he bribed. Insurance in case he ever needed leverage. Those records are in a safe deposit box at First Commerce Bank, downtown Philadelphia. Box 847. You'll need a warrant, but the box is registered to his shell corp. Move fast. He'll try to empty it as soon as he knows you're coming. She showed the message to Captain Morgan, who immediately forwarded it to Agent Ross. How does this person know all this? Nina asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Someone close to Richard, the Admiral said slowly. Someone with access to his financial records and legal documents. Someone who wants him exposed. Sophia's eyes widened. Aunt Margaret. Your uncle's wife? She filed for divorce 6 months ago. I remember Dad mentioning it. Richard fought it, claimed she was unstable. Sophia looked at her father. What if she wasn't unstable? What if she found out what he'd done and he tried to silence her the same way he silenced me? The Admiral pulled out his phone and dialed. Margaret, it's Marcus. I need you to tell me the truth. Are you the one who's been sending evidence to Clare Donovan? A pause. Then his expression shifted to something between relief and fury. Stay where you are. Federal agents will need your testimony. And Margaret, thank you. He hung up and looked at Sophia. Your aunt's been collecting evidence against Richard for 8 months. Financial records, communications, even recordings of him bragging about how he handled your accident to ensure his contract went through. She's been waiting for the right moment to destroy him. Why wait? Claire asked. Because she needed leverage. Richard has powerful friends. If she'd gone public without ironclad proof, he would have buried her. But now, with the Summit Ridge investigation creating media attention and federal oversight, now the world is watching, Nina finished. And he can't make her disappear quietly. Agent Ross called back within minutes. We have the warrant. Moving on the safe deposit box now. And I've just received confirmation that Margaret Winters is en route to Philadelphia with her attorney and a USB drive containing what she describes as comprehensive documentation of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy spanning 6 years. Claire felt something shift in her chest. This is really happening. It's happening fast, Ross confirmed. Richard Winters is being detained in D.C. for questioning. His assets are frozen pending investigation, and Margaret Winters has agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity from any conspiracy charges. The call ended. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Sophia started laughing, not hysterical, clear and sharp and real. My aunt destroyed her husband to save me. She destroyed her husband because he's a criminal, the Admiral corrected gently. But yes, she chose you over him. The next 12 hours unfolded like controlled detonations. At 8 a.m., federal agents opened Richard Winters' safe deposit box and found exactly what Margaret had promised: detailed records of bribes, falsified documents, and a ledger showing $50,000 paid to Marcus Webb with a note beside it. SW Injury Clearance Contract Protection. At 9 a.m., Philadelphia's district attorney added Richard Winters to the Summit Ridge investigation as a co-conspirator in Sophia's medical negligence. At 10 a.m., Margaret Winters arrived at the federal building with her attorney and 3 bankers' boxes of evidence. She gave a deposition that lasted 6 hours and detailed systematic corruption that went far beyond one bribed doctor. Claire watched the news coverage from the secured apartment, Nina and Sophia beside her. The Admiral had been called to Washington to testify before a congressional oversight committee. Captain Morgan had gone with him, both to provide legal support and to ensure his testimony was protected. Your father's going to be okay, Claire said to Sophia. I know, because he didn't know, because, for once, someone's innocence can actually be proven. Sophia's expression was complicated. Is it wrong that I'm glad my uncle's going to prison? It's justice, Nina said simply. Not revenge, justice. Claire's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize, but this time with a 202 area code. Washington, D.C. This is Clare Donovan. Miss Donovan, this is Catherine Vega, Deputy Assistant to the President's Chief of Staff. I'm calling to formally extend the invitation to join the Patient Safety Task Force as Senior Nursing Advisor. The position comes with GS-14 federal pay grade, full benefits, and a mandate to help reshape medical oversight policy nationwide. Are you interested? Claire's hands were shaking. Yes, absolutely yes. Excellent. We'll send the formal paperwork within 24 hours. And Miss Donovan, what you did took extraordinary courage. We're honored to have you. The call ended. Claire sat staring at her phone. Nina grinned. Did you just accept a job with the White House? I think I did. Sophia hugged her, careful of her own healing incision. You're going to change everything. I'm going to try. By evening, the media narrative had completely shifted. Every major network was running stories about the systemic corruption at Summit Ridge, the bribed Montana doctor, and Richard Winters' conspiracy. But they were also running stories about Clare, the nurse who'd refused to be silenced, who'd stood up to institutional power and triggered a reckoning. The nursing community had mobilized. The hashtag Listen to Nurses was trending globally. Hospitals across the country were announcing policy changes to formalize nurse advocacy in diagnostic decisions. Medical schools were adding courses on hierarchical bias and the importance of interdisciplinary observation. And in Philadelphia, Summit Ridge Medical Center announced it would close permanently at the end of the month. Patients would be transferred to other facilities. Staff would be offered positions elsewhere. The building itself would be sold, the proceeds directed to a patient compensation fund for everyone who'd suffered under its failed leadership. Dr. Raymond Ashford's medical license was revoked by the state board in an emergency session. Dr. Patricia Vance negotiated a plea deal, 5 years probation, permanent loss of license, and mandatory testimony against Ashford in his criminal trial. Eleanor Hutchins was indicted on 17 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. Her bail was set at $2 million. Marcus Peltier, the security analyst who'd started the fire, accepted a plea agreement, 3 years in federal prison in exchange for full cooperation. And Richard Winters, facing charges of bribery, conspiracy, fraud, and reckless endangerment, was denied bail entirely. The judge cited flight risk and danger to witnesses. Claire watched it all unfold with a sense of surreal disconnection. 48 hours ago, she'd been a bedside nurse. Now she was testifying before federal investigators, fielding calls from national media, and preparing to reshape healthcare policy at the highest levels of government. On the third morning in the secure department, Agent Ross arrived with news that made everything else feel small by comparison. We've completed the preliminary investigation into Dr. Webb's other patients, the ones mentioned in the leaked documents. She set down a tablet showing 12 names. 4 of them suffered serious complications from missed diagnoses. 2 died. All within 6 months of being examined by Webb while he was operating under the influence or being paid to misdiagnose. Claire felt sick. How many people did Richard's bribe kill? We may never know the full count, but Webb's medical records show he received similar payments from 3 other defense contractors over a 10-year period. We're investigating all of them now. Sophia's voice was hollow. I was just the one who survived long enough for someone to notice. You're the one who made us look, Ross corrected. Without your case breaking open, we'd never have connected these dots. Those other families will finally get answers because of you. The Admiral returned from Washington that afternoon, looking exhausted but vindicated. The Congressional Committee cleared me of any knowledge or involvement. My investment in Richard's company has been formally divested and the proceeds donated to medical oversight nonprofits. It's over. Sophia stood and walked to him without assistance, the first time since surgery she'd moved entirely on her own. It's not over, it's starting. The real work is just starting. He embraced her carefully, and Claire saw tears on both their faces. That evening, Margaret Winters requested a meeting with Sophia. They met in a private room at the federal building with Agent Ross present but silent. Margaret was a small woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She sat across from Sophia and spoke without preamble. I need you to know I didn't discover what Richard did until 6 months ago. I found the records by accident while searching for financial documents during the divorce. When I realized what he'd done to you, that he'd paid to keep you sick, to keep you suffering so his contract wouldn't be delayed, I wanted to kill him. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. I almost went public immediately, but my attorney convinced me to wait, to gather more evidence, to build a case that would actually destroy him instead of just embarrassing him. So I collected everything, every bribe, every falsified report, every life he'd damaged for profit, and I waited for the right moment. She looked directly at Sophia. When I saw your post online, when I saw Claire's interview, I knew this was the moment. You'd already started the fire. I just gave it fuel. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Thank you. Don't thank me. I should have found out sooner. Should have stopped him before. You stopped him when you could. That's what matters. Margaret's composure cracked. She covered her face with her hands and wept silently. Sophia reached across the table and held her aunt's hand until the tears stopped. 2 weeks later, Summit Ridge Medical Center held its final staff meeting. The auditorium was packed. Nurses, physicians, administrators, all gathered to hear Eleanor Hutchins' replacement announce the closure details. Clare attended, standing in the back with Nina and Judith Carmichael, who'd been offered and accepted the head nursing position at Philadelphia General. The new interim CEO was a woman named Dr. Sarah Mendez, brought in from Johns Hopkins specifically to manage the shutdown. She was direct and unflinching. Summit Ridge failed its patients. It failed its staff. It failed the basic mission of healthcare, to do no harm. We cannot undo that failure, but we can ensure it never happens again. Every patient file will be reviewed by independent physicians. Anyone who suffered negligent care will be compensated, and the building itself will become a training center focused on teaching patient advocacy and systemic safety. She paused, scanning the room. Some of you enabled what happened here. Others tried to stop it and were silenced. And a few refused to be silent, no matter the cost. To that last group, represented most visibly by Nurse Clare Donovan, thank you. You reminded us why we became healthcare workers in the first place. The room erupted in applause. Clare felt her face burn as hundreds of people turned to look at her. Nina squeezed her shoulder. After the meeting, dozens of nurses approached Clare. Some wanted to shake her hand. Others shared their own stories of being dismissed, of raising concerns that were ignored, of watching patients suffer because hierarchy mattered more than observation. You gave us permission to speak up, one nurse said, tears in her eyes. You showed us it's possible to win. Clare didn't know how to respond to that. She just hugged the woman and promised to keep fighting. 1 month after Sophia's surgery, Clare received 3 pieces of news in rapid succession. First, Dr. Raymond Ashford's trial date was set for January. He faced 47 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. Second, Richard Winters had attempted to flee federal custody and been recaptured within 12 hours. His bail request was permanently denied. Third, the Presidential Task Force on Patient Safety was being formally announced, and Clare's name was listed first among the nursing advisors. She was packing her apartment, preparing to move to Washington, D.C. for the new position, when Sophia and the Admiral arrived unannounced. We wanted to see you before you left, Sophia said. She looked healthy now, her hair beginning to grow back in soft, dark waves. The pressure headaches were gone. The light sensitivity resolved. She'd gained back 15 pounds, and her eyes were clear. How are you feeling? Clare asked. Human. For the first time in 7 years, I feel human. The Admiral handed Clare an envelope. This is from the Navy. It's a civilian commendation for extraordinary service to a military family. It comes with no financial benefit and no official rank, but it does grant you access to military medical facilities for consultation purposes. We thought it might be useful in your new role. Clare opened the envelope and found a certificate signed by the Secretary of the Navy himself. She couldn't speak. There's something else, Sophia said. I've been accepted to nursing school, University of Pennsylvania. I start in January. Clare's eyes filled with tears. Sophia, that's incredible. You showed me what nursing actually is. Not just following orders, seeing what others miss, fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. I want to do that. I want to be like you. You're already like me. You refuse to disappear. That's where it starts. They stayed for hours, helping Clare pack, sharing pizza, talking about the future. When they finally left, Clare stood alone in her nearly empty apartment and allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. One conversation, one observation, one refusal to be silent. And everything had changed. The trial began on a frozen January morning in Philadelphia's federal courthouse. Clare sat in the gallery with Sophia, Nina, and the Admiral, watching as Dr. Raymond Ashford was led into the courtroom in a suit that no longer fit quite right. The prosecution presented their case with surgical precision. Falsified records, deliberate misdiagnosis, conspiracy to commit fraud, witness intimidation. Each charge supported by documentation David Marsh had preserved, by testimony from nurses who'd been silenced, by Sophia's own medical history laid bare for the jury. Ashford's defense attempted to argue diagnostic complexity, honest mistakes, systemic pressures, but the video evidence destroyed them. Ashford's own words, captured by David Marsh's hidden recordings, proved premeditation and malice. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Ashford showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but Clare saw his hands tremble when the judge announced sentencing would be scheduled for the following month. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Clare gave a brief statement. This verdict isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that no patient is ever dismissed, silenced, or harmed because the people responsible for their care prioritize pride over healing. And it's about recognizing that nurses, the people who spend the most time with patients, have vital insights that must be heard and respected. A reporter called out, "What do you say to nurses who are afraid to speak up?" Claire looked directly into the camera. "I say speak anyway. Document everything, trust your observations, and know that you're not alone. The system is changing because we're demanding it change. Be loud, be persistent, be brave. Your patients need you." The footage went viral within hours. 3 weeks later, Claire stood in a Washington, D.C. conference room surrounded by medical ethicists, policy experts, and healthcare administrators from across the federal government. The presidential task force was officially beginning its work. The agenda was ambitious: revising diagnostic protocols, implementing mandatory nurse consultation requirements, creating protected whistleblower channels, and establishing oversight mechanisms to catch institutional failures before they became systemic. Claire had been assigned to lead the Nursing Advocacy Subcommittee. Her first proposal, mandatory inclusion of bedside nurse observations in all diagnostic decision trees, was already generating intense debate. "This fundamentally changes the physician-nurse dynamic," one doctor argued. "It undermines clinical authority." "Good," Claire replied. "Clinical authority that silences valuable observation is dangerous. We're not eliminating physician expertise, we're ensuring it's informed by complete information." The debate continued for hours, but Claire held her ground. By the end of the session, her proposal had been advanced for formal consideration. Walking out of the building that evening, she received a text from Sophia. "Just finished my first week of nursing classes. It's hard and amazing, and I think about you every day. Thank you for showing me who I could become." Claire smiled and texted back, "You showed yourself. I just refused to look away." 6 months after Sophia's surgery, Summit Ridge Medical Center's building reopened as the National Center for Patient Advocacy and Medical Safety. The dedication ceremony drew healthcare workers from across the country. Claire spoke briefly, standing at a podium in the building where she'd once been threatened for doing her job. "This center exists because a young woman refused to believe she was crazy when everyone told her she was. Because a family demanded answers when silence was easier. Because one lawyer chose conscience over career. Because nurses everywhere kept documenting, kept observing, kept fighting even when they were told to stop." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "Healthcare is broken in ways that hurt patients and exhaust providers, but it's not unfixable. Every person in this room has the power to change it, by listening, by questioning, by refusing to accept that this is how it's always been done is good enough. We owe our patients nothing less than complete dedication to their healing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, Claire found Sophia in the crowd. The young woman was in scrubs now. Her nursing program required clinical rotations. She looked tired and happy and whole. "How's school?" Claire asked. "Brutal. Incredible. I'm in pediatrics this month. Yesterday a kid told me I had pretty hair." She touched her head self-consciously. The regrowth was complete now, thick and healthy. "I cried for 20 minutes. That sounds about right." They walked outside together into Philadelphia's summer evening. The city looked different than it had 6 months ago. Brighter, somehow. Full of possibility. "I've been thinking about my testimony," Sophia said, "for Richard's trial. It's coming up next month. How do you feel about it?" "Ready. He stole 7 years of my life for money. I want to look him in the eye and tell him exactly what that cost me." "You're going to be amazing." Sophia smiled. "I learned from the best." Richard Winter's trial was shorter than Ashford's. The evidence was overwhelming. Margaret's testimony alone would have been enough to convict, but the prosecution had dozens of witnesses, hundreds of documents, and Richard's own recorded admissions. When Sophia took the stand, the courtroom fell absolutely silent. "I was 17, she said, her voice steady. "I fell off a horse and hit my head hard enough to fracture my skull. A doctor who'd been paid by my uncle told me I was fine. That lie destroyed the next 7 years of my life. I lost my hair, my health, my sense of self. I was told I was mentally ill when I was actually suffering from nerve compression caused by a misdiagnosed fracture." She looked directly at Richard, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. "You did that. For a contract. For money. You decided my suffering was an acceptable price for your profit. But here's what you didn't count on. I survived. I found people who actually cared, and now you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison knowing that the niece you tried to bury helped destroy you." Richard's composure finally cracked. He looked away. The jury convicted him on every count. The judge sentenced him to 32 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. As he was led from the courtroom, Richard glanced back at Sophia one final time. She met his eyes without flinching. Outside, the Admiral stood with his daughter, both of them surrounded by media, but saying nothing. They didn't need to. The verdict spoke for itself. 1 year after Sophia's surgery, Clare received an invitation to speak at the American Nurses Association National Convention in Chicago. The keynote address: 10,000 nurses. She almost declined. Public speaking still terrified her. But Nina, now serving as chief of neurosurgery at Philadelphia General, convinced her to accept. "You have a platform now. Use it." So Clare stood on that stage, looking out at 10,000 faces, and told the truth. "I didn't set out to change anything. I just wanted to save one patient. But that one patient became a catalyst for exposing systemic failures that had been hurting people for decades. Because I refused to accept that her suffering was psychosomatic when my observation told me otherwise." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Every single person in this room has been dismissed at some point. Told you were overreacting. Told to stay in your lane. Told that your observations weren't as valuable as physician assessments. And many of you stayed silent because speaking up felt too risky." Silence in the auditorium. "I'm not going to tell you speaking up is easy. It's not. It cost me colleagues. It cost me sleep. It nearly cost me my career. But it saved a life. And it started a conversation that's reshaping how we think about patient advocacy and clinical hierarchy. That's worth the cost." She gripped the podium. "You are not invisible. Your observations matter. Your instincts matter. Your dedication to patient welfare matters. And when you see something wrong, when you know in your gut that a patient is being failed, you have an obligation to speak, document everything, follow proper channels. But if those channels are broken, break through them. Find someone who will listen. Be persistent, be brave, be loud." The applause started as a ripple and built to a roar. 10,000 nurses rose to their feet. Clare felt tears on her face, but didn't wipe them away. This moment, this acknowledgement, belonged to every nurse who'd ever been silenced. That evening, she had dinner with Sophia and Nina at a restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. Sophia was halfway through her nursing program now, top of her class. Nina had been nominated for a prestigious research award, and Clare had just been promoted to lead the entire patient safety task force. "To women who refuse to disappear," Nina toasted. They raised their glasses. "I've been thinking about what comes next," Sophia said. "After I graduate, I want to specialize in neurorecovery, help other people who've been dismissed and misdiagnosed." "You'll be incredible at that," Clare said. "I learned from the best." Sophia smiled. "Both of you. You showed me that healing isn't just medical. It's about seeing people, really seeing them." Clare thought about that later, walking alone along the lakeshore. Seeing people. That's all she'd done. Refused to look away when looking away was easier. And it had changed everything. 18 months after the surgery, Summit Ridge Medical Center's legal settlements were finalized. 47 patients who'd suffered under Ashford's care received compensation totaling $93 million. The hospital's insurance carrier went bankrupt. Eleanor Hutchins pleaded guilty to reduce charges and accepted a 5-year prison sentence. And David Marsh, the attorney who'd preserved the evidence that brought it all down, was found living quietly in Portland, Oregon, under a new name. When reporters tracked him down, he gave one brief statement. "I spent 2 years watching good people suffer because bad people protected themselves. When Clare Donovan refused to be silenced, I saw my chance to do something right. I'd do it again without hesitation." He declined further interviews and disappeared back into anonymity. 2 years after that first conversation in Sophia's hospital room, Clare stood in the White House Rose Garden as the president signed the Patient Advocacy Protection Act into law. The legislation mandated nurse consultation in complex diagnostic cases, created federal protections for healthcare whistleblowers, and established oversight mechanisms to catch institutional failures early. Sophia stood beside Clare, now a registered nurse herself, working in pediatric neurorecovery at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The Admiral was there in full dress uniform. Nina attended as a representative of the medical community. Captain Morgan, promoted to commander, represented naval medical oversight. The president finished signing and looked directly at Clare. "This law exists because one nurse refused to believe that hierarchy mattered more than healing. Thank you, Nurse Donovan, for your courage and your persistence. You've made healthcare safer for millions." The cameras flashed. The crowd applauded. But Claire was looking at Sophia, healthy, strong, whole. The young woman who'd almost disappeared into medical negligence and institutional arrogance. The catalyst for everything that had changed. Sophia smiled and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Claire shook her head and mouthed back. Thank you. Because that's what this had always been about. 2 people refusing to accept that suffering was inevitable, choosing to fight when fighting seemed impossible, and discovering that courage, once sparked, could burn down corruption and rebuild something better from the ashes. That evening, Claire returned to her DC apartment and found one final email from the anonymous encrypted account that had started it all. The message was simple. You changed the world by refusing to look away. Never stop looking. Never stop fighting. There are more Sophias out there waiting for someone like you to see them. Margaret Clare smiled. Sophia's aunt had been the invisible architect of so much of this, the silent force who'd gathered evidence and waited for the perfect moment to strike. She replied simply, I won't, I promise. Then she deleted the thread and turned off her computer. Outside her window, Washington, D.C. glittered in the darkness. Somewhere in that vast city, policies were being written that would reshape healthcare. Somewhere across the country, a nurse was documenting a concern that would be heard instead of dismissed. Somewhere a patient who might have been erased was being seen, being heard, being saved. The system was broken, but it was healing. One observation at a time. One voice at a time. One person refusing to disappear at a time. Claire Donovan had been just a nurse. Invisible. Underestimated. Dismissed. Until she wasn't. And in refusing to be silent, she'd proven that the quietest voices, when raised in truth, could shatter the foundations of corruption and rebuild them into something worthy of the people they were meant to serve. She'd wanted to save one patient. She'd ended up helping save them all.